Your black women's charity dreams belong here, Zola? Julian Croft's venomous jab ignites Blackwood's grand hall, slashing at Zola Vance, a black woman radiant in a royal blue gown that flares like wildfire. The chandelier's glow wavers. Elites in tuxedos and shimmering dresses freeze, some sneering, others uneasy, craving her collapse. Zola's eyes, twin flames of defiance, scorch Julian, her silence a roaring blaze that rattles the room. He, arm entwined with Blair's cold grace, laughs, certain he's broken her. But the oak doors at the hall's end thunder open, admitting Kaelen Shaw, Zola's billionaire husband. What power will he wield to crush Julian's scorn? Will Zola's fire burn away their past? How will this night redefine their world? One ember sparks, ready to unleash an inferno. She's fooling the world with her black empowerment nonsense, Julian Croft's voice snarled through the sleek Manhattan penthouse, his fingers crumpling a Forbes magazine as he glared at Blair, her icy blonde hair catching the city's neon glow. The cover blazed with Zola Vance's face, her eyes fierce under the headline, Redefining Leadership, Innovate Forward's Global Impact. Julian tossed the magazine onto a glass table, its thud echoing like a challenge. She's playing the charity card, Blair, but I'll burn her down at Blackwood. Across the country, in a San Francisco office pulsing with ambition, Zola Vance leaned over a desk cluttered with reports and coffee mugs, her team's cheers still ringing from a $500 million deal with an international foundation. Innovate Forward, her nonprofit, had just secured funding to train another million women of color for global leadership roles. Screens around her flared with metrics. 1.5 million women empowered, $3 billion in education investments. Her royal blue blazer, tailored sharply, mirrored the gown she'd wear to Blackwood, a silent vow to stand unbowed. Yet as her assistant slid a cream-colored envelope across the desk, Blackwood Academy's gold-embossed seal glinting like a taunt, her breath caught. The past flickered, unbidden. Years ago, Julian's voice had cut deeper than any blade. Education for women? Wall Street doesn't care about your dreams, Zola, he'd sneered in their shared apartment, his cufflinks glinting as he adjusted his tie. Blair gets it. Power is money, not ideals. Zola had been a double major at Blackwood, sociology and global studies. Her passion for equity was dismissed as cute by Julian's Wall Street crowd. His indifference had eroded her. Each critique, her bold ideas, her natural curls, her unapologetic blackness, stoking a quiet fire she hadn't yet learned to wield. Their divorce was civil, a cold agreement, but his final words lingered. You'll fade, Zola. You're not built for the real world. Now that world was hers. Innovate Forward wasn't just a nonprofit, it was a revolution. Its programs reshaping boardrooms from Nairobi to New York. Yet the envelope burned in her hands, its weight heavier than paper. Blackwood was Julian's kingdom, a place where her voice had once been drowned by whispers of too much or not enough. Her fingers traced the seal, memories of classrooms where professors praised her intellect but mispronounced her name, of galas where Julian's friends offered backhanded compliments. You're so articulate for someone from your background. The fire in her chest flared, not with rage but with resolve. She didn't need to go. Her life was full, board meetings, speeches, and women whose lives she'd changed. But the invitation wasn't just a call to a reunion. It was a gauntlet, a dare to face the world that had tried to dim her light. Zola's phone buzzed, Kaelen Shaw's face lighting up the screen. Her husband, a billionaire investor whose quiet power moved markets, was her anchor. You've seen the Forbes piece? His voice rumbled through the video call, warm but edged with pride. You're not just right, Zola. You're rewriting the rules. Kaelen wasn't like Julian. Where Julian craved the spotlight, Kaelen wielded influence like a shadow, his wealth a tool, not a trophy. He'd funded Innovate Forward's early days, not out of pity, but belief, sitting in on her strategy sessions, listening to her vision of equity with a stillness that made her feel seen. Blackwood's not ready for you, he said now, his dark eyes steady. But go, show them the future you're building. Zola's lips curved, a spark igniting. She didn't want revenge. Revenge was too small. She wanted reclamation, to walk into Blackwood not as Julian's ex-wife, but as Zola Vance, the woman whose work commanded billions and changed lives. The envelope felt lighter now, not a burden, but a fuse. She'd attend, not to prove herself to Julian, but to claim the space she'd earned. Across Manhattan, Julian's smirk faded as Blair sipped her wine, her eyes narrowing. "She'll show up, Julian," Blair said, her voice smooth but sharp. "And she'll act like she's above us." Julian's jaw tightened. Zola's Forbes cover had shaken him, its glow exposing cracks in his carefully curated empire. He'd built his life on deals and dominance, but her success, her audacity to thrive without him, gnawed at him. "She's nothing," he muttered, but his fingers betrayed him, clenching the magazine's edge. "I'll make sure everyone at Blackwood knows it." Zola stood, her office's skyline view framing her like a portrait of power. She slid the invitation into her bag, her mind already racing to the gown she'd wear. A Ghanaian designer's creation, bold and unapologetic. She wasn't returning to Blackwood to beg for a seat at their table. She was coming to build her own, one that would eclipse theirs. The fire Julian had tried to snuff out years ago was now ablaze, and she'd let it burn bright enough to blind them all. "I'm not going to Blackwood to grovel, Kaelen. I'm going to torch their stage." Zola Vance's voice crackled with defiance as she faced Kaelen Shaw across her San Francisco office, the city's skyline a mosaic of steel and ambition behind her. Her royal blue blazer, sharp as a blade, framed her like a warrior queen, her sleek black hair a banner of unapologetic strength. Kaelen, his dark eyes glinting with quiet pride, leaned against her desk, his tailored suit a study in understated power. "Then let's make sure they feel the heat," he said, his low rumble a spark to her fire. The cream-colored Blackwood invitation lay between them, no longer a taunt, but a fuse, ready to ignite. Zola had decided she wouldn't walk into Blackwood's gilded hall to beg for acceptance from Julian Croft's elitist crowd or prove her worth to the man who'd once dismissed her dreams as cute. She was going to reclaim her space, to stand as the architect of a global movement. Innovate Forward wasn't just her nonprofit. It was a revolution, empowering women of color to lead in boardrooms and parliaments, its impact measured in lives transformed and billions invested. But Blackwood was a battlefield, a place where her passion for equity had been mocked as too idealistic by professors and peers alike. Julian's voice echoed from years past, his words a cold wind. "You're wasting your brilliance on lost causes, Zola." She'd let him dim her then, softening her edges to fit his world. Never again. Kaelen's hand grazed hers, grounding her. "You've already outgrown them," he said, his voice steady but fierce. "But they don't know it yet." Together they'd crafted a plan, not just to attend, but to dominate. A $100 million donation to Blackwood's leadership program, tied to strict conditions, curricula focused on diversity, equity, and global impact, modeled on Innovate Forward's framework. It wasn't charity, it was a takeover, a way to etch Zola's vision into the institution that once tried to erase her. An email from a nervous board member had arrived that morning. "Ms. Vance, your guidance is reshaping our program." Kaelen smirked, reading it over her shoulder. "They're sweating already." Zola's mind turned to her armor for the night, a gown by a Ghanaian designer, its royal blue fabric woven with threads of gold, a nod to her heritage and a declaration of her power. She'd wear it not to dazzle, but to command, her sleek hair a crown she'd refused to tame. Years ago, Julian had winced at her natural curls, murmuring, "They're a bit much for the gala, don't you think?" She'd straightened them then, each pass of the iron a surrender. Now every choice, her hair, her gown, her presence, was a rebellion, a flame kindled by the woman she'd become. Across the country, in Manhattan's glittering cage, Julian paced his penthouse, Blair lounging on a velvet sofa, her wine glass catching the city's pulse. "She'll come, Julian," Blair said, her voice a blade cloaked in silk, "and she'll try to steal your spotlight." Julian's jaw clenched, the Forbes cover still burning in his mind. Zola's success wasn't just a surprise, it was an affront, a crack in the empire he'd built on deals and charm. He'd spent years at Blackwood basking in its approval, his mergers celebrated as triumphs while Zola's ideas were dismissed as noble but naive. Now her name was on every philanthropist's lips, her nonprofit a global force. "She's a fraud," he spat, but his eyes betrayed doubt, flicking to the invitation on his desk. "I'll make sure Blackwood sees through her." Blair's smile was calculated. "Then make it public," she purred, leaning closer. "Show them she's still the dreamer who doesn't belong." Her words stoked Julian's resolve, his need to reassert dominance over the woman who dared to outshine him. He'd humiliate her, not with shouts, but with the sharp, polished cruelty he'd mastered. Blackwood was his stage, and Zola would be his foil, until she wasn't. Zola stood, her office a crucible of purpose. She opened a sketch of her gown on her tablet, its gold threads glinting like embers. "This isn't about Julian," she told Kaelen, her voice steady but fierce. "It's about every woman I've lifted, every door I've opened." Kaelen nodded, his silence a vow. He'd be there, not as her savior, but as her equal, his wealth and influence amplifying her fire. The donation was their weapon, a way to rewrite Blackwood's legacy. "They'll try to smile and clap," he said, a grin tugging at his lips, "but they'll choke on it when they see what you've built." As Zola packed the invitation, her fingers steady, she felt the weight of her past lift. Blackwood wasn't her prison anymore. It was her arena. She wasn't returning to answer Julian's taunts or Blair's sneers. She was coming to burn down their illusions, to show a world that had underestimated her what power truly looked like. The fire she'd once buried was now ablaze, and Blackwood would feel its heat. She strides in like she owns Blackwood's soul. Blair's whisper, sharp as a shard of ice, cut through the hum of Blackwood's grand hall, her words dripping with venom as she leaned into Julian Croft. Zola Vance stepped through the arched doors, her royal blue gown, woven with Ghanaian gold threads, flaring like a flame in the chandelier's glow. Her sleek black hair, a defiant crown, caught every light, and her presence was a silent detonation, commanding the room without a word. The crowd of elites, tuxedos crisp, gowns shimmering, paused mid-sip, some smirking at the audacity of the woman they once overlooked, others shifting uneasily, sensing a shift in the air. Zola's eyes, twin embers of resolve, swept the hall, undaunted by the weight of their stares. Julian stood near the bar, his tailored suit a veneer of control, but his jaw tightened as whispers rippled. "Isn't that Zola Vance, the Innovate Forward woman?" Her nonprofit's name was on every philanthropist's lips, its mission to empower women of color in global leadership, a force reshaping power structures. Yet to Julian's Wall Street allies, she was still the dreamer who didn't belong. A former classmate, his tie loosened by bourbon, snorted, "Running a charity must pay peanuts, right?" Zola's lips curved, not in defense, but in quiet disdain, her silence louder than his jab. She moved forward, heels clicking like sparks on marble, each step a challenge to the world that had once tried to dim her. A board member, graying and flustered, intercepted her near a velvet-draped table. "Ms. Vance," he stammered, his bow tie askew, "your involvement with our leadership program is transformative." His deference, a nod to the $100 million donation Zola and Kaelen had engineered, hung in the air like smoke, unnoticed by most but heavy with meaning. Zola nodded, her gaze steady, knowing the board's gratitude was less about admiration and more about survival. They'd agreed to her terms, diversity-focused curricula, equity mandates, because her influence left them no choice. She wasn't here to thank them. She was here to claim what was hers. Across the hall, Julian's eyes narrowed, his knuckles whitening around a champagne flute. Blair, in a silver gown that gleamed like ambition, leaned closer, her voice a low hiss. "She's acting like she runs this place. You can't let her steal your night." Julian's smirk was a mask, but inside, Zola's poise was a blade twisting in his pride. He'd ruled Blackwood's social scene years ago, his mergers celebrated while her ideas were dismissed as noble but impractical. Now her name carried weight he couldn't ignore. Forbes covers, global summits, whispers of her impact. "She's a fraud," he muttered, but his voice wavered, betraying the doubt gnawing at him. Blair's eyes glinted, calculating. Then prove it, Julian. Put her back in her place. Zola felt their stares, twin daggers from across the room, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced this before. Classmates who'd called her too passionate, professors who'd praised her mind but questioned her fit. She'd learned to navigate their world, smiling through their microaggressions. But tonight was different. She wasn't here to play their game. She was here to rewrite the rules. A young alum, her dress vibrant with African print, approached, eyes wide with admiration. "Ms. Vance, your work inspired my nonprofit," she said, voice trembling. "You showed us we don't have to shrink." Zola's smile softened, a spark of connection. "Keep burning bright," she said, her words a quiet command. Julian watched, his composure fraying. The hall, once his kingdom, felt unsteady, its air thick with the heat of Zola's presence. He drained his flute, the champagne bitter. Blair's hand tightened on his arm, her smile a polished weapon. "She's turning heads," she whispered, her tone a mix of envy and strategy. "Do something, or she'll eclipse you." Julian nodded, his mind racing. He'd humiliate Zola, not with shouts, but with the sharp, public cruelty he'd perfected. She was a threat, not just to his ego, but to the world he'd built on charm and control. He stepped forward, ready to strike, his words already forming like embers, ready to ignite. Zola sensed the shift, the room's pulse quickening. She stood near a towering floral arrangement, its petals no match for the fire, in her stance. She wasn't here to answer Julian's taunts or Blair's schemes. She was here to claim a stage they couldn't fathom, one built on the lives she'd transformed. The board member lingered, offering pleasantries, but her focus was elsewhere, on the oak doors at the hall's end, where Kaelen would soon enter. Their plan, a blaze carefully stoked, was about to erupt. She wasn't just attending a reunion, she was setting the stage for a reckoning, one that would leave Julian's world in ashes. "Still chasing your little black women's education fantasy, Zola? Innovate backward, is it?" Julian Croft's voice sliced through the Blackwood Grand Hall's glittering din, a polished blade of mockery aimed at Zola Vance. He stood, champagne flute raised, his tailored suit gleaming under the chandelier's fire, surrounded by a knot of Wall Street allies whose smirks mirrored his own. The crowd hushed, their eyes sharp with anticipation, locked on Zola, her royal blue gown a defiant flame against the hall's opulence. Blair, her silver dress catching light like a predator's glint, leaned into Julian, her whisper venomous. "Show her she's nothing here." Julian's smile was a weapon, honed by years of boardroom victories. But beneath it, a flicker of doubt betrayed him. Zola's presence, unyielding and radiant, was a spark he couldn't extinguish. Zola stood near the floral-draped stage, her sleek black hair a crown of defiance. Her gaze a molten arrow that pierced Julian's bravado. The room's pulse stuttered, split between those who laughed with Julian, old Blackwood elites, their privilege a shield, and those who shifted uneasy, sensing a storm. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, clutched her glass, whispering to a friend, "She's Zola Vance, the Innovate Forward leader." Zola's nonprofit, a global force empowering women of color in leadership, was no mere charity. It had shifted paradigms, channeling billions into education programs that reshaped power from Lagos to London. Yet Julian's crowd saw only a dreamer out of place. Julian stepped closer, his voice louder, dripping with condescension. "This hall isn't for your little charity stunts, Zola," he said, the words echoing like a gavel. "Stick to your fundraisers. Leave power to those who know it." The insult landed like a match in dry grass, igniting snickers from his allies. Blair's laugh, sharp and crystalline, cut through, her eyes glinting with triumph. She'd urged this moment, her whispers in Julian's ear a catalyst. Make her small again. To them, Zola's work, her mission to lift women like her, was a quaint hobby, irrelevant in their world of mergers and money. The crowd leaned in, some relishing the spectacle, others, younger, bolder, frowning, their faith in Zola's vision a quiet rebellion. Zola's smile didn't waver, but it sharpened, a blade of her own. She stood taller, her gown catching the light like a beacon, her silence a firestorm held in check. Every eye felt the weight of her presence, a woman who'd once dimmed herself for Julian's approval, now blazing with purpose. Years ago, his critiques had stung. "Your ideas are too loud, Zola," he'd murmured, dismissing her passion for equity as naive. She'd folded then, softening her voice, her dreams to fit his world. Now she was done bending. "You're wrong, Julian," she said, her voice low but lethal, cutting through the laughter like a spark through smoke. The room gasped, the air electric with her defiance. Julian's smirk faltered, his flute trembling in his hand. He'd expected her to shrink, to flee, as she had in their marriage's quiet battles. But Zola's eyes held no trace of that woman. They burned, unapologetic, as if she saw through his polished cruelty to the insecurity beneath. The Forbes cover, her name on global lips, her nonprofit's billions, they haunted him, a truth he couldn't outrun. He pressed on, voice rising. "You think your little programs matter? This is Blackwood, real power, not your fantasies." His allies chuckled, but the sound was thinner now, their confidence fraying as Zola stood unmoved. A board member, hovering nearby, adjusted his tie, sweat beading on his brow. He knew the truth. Zola's influence had forced Blackwood's hand, her $100 million donation a sword held over their legacy, demanding diversity and equity. His nervous glance flickered to the oak doors at the hall's end, as if sensing the storm about to break. The young alum stepped closer to Zola, her voice soft but firm. "Your work changed my life, Ms. Vance." Others nodded, a ripple of support that Julian didn't see. His focus locked on Zola, desperate to reclaim control. Blair's hand tightened on Julian's arm, her smile a mask of calculation. "Finish it," she hissed, sensing the crowd shift. Julian's eyes narrowed, his pride a fragile ember he couldn't let die. He opened his mouth, another barb ready, but Zola's gaze held him, a fire that burned hotter than his scorn. She didn't need to speak again. Her presence was a verdict, a promise that his world was about to crumble. The hall's air thickened, every breath heavy with anticipation. Somewhere beyond the crowd, the oak doors quivered, a low groan signaling Kaelen Shaw's approach. Zola's lips twitched, a spark of knowing. Julian's blade had struck, but hers was sharper, and the inferno was coming. "Your leadership program's reshaping the world, Zola." Kaelen Shaw's voice thundered as the oak doors of Blackwood's Grand Hall crashed open, his navy suit cutting through the chandelier's glow like a blade of midnight. Zola Vance stood unshaken, her royal blue gown a blazing ember in the room's stunned silence, her sleek black hair a defiant crown. A massive screen behind the stage flared to life, its bold white text searing the crowd. "Innovate Forward, 1.5 and 1 Women Empowered, 3B Education Impact." The elites, tuxedos stiff, gowns shimmering, gaped, their champagne flutes frozen midair. Some, the younger alums, erupted in applause. Others, Julian Croft's Wall Street cronies, exchanged uneasy glances, their smirks from moments ago dissolving like ash. Julian stood rooted, his face paling, the flute in his hand trembling as Kaelen's presence, a billionaire titan whose wealth dwarfed their fortunes, shifted the room's gravity. Zola's eyes, twin flames of triumph, met Kaelen's, a silent vow passing between them. He strode toward her, his steps deliberate, each one a spark igniting the hall's tension. "Your work's been endorsed by the United Nations," he said, loud enough for all to hear, his voice a low, resonant fire. "You're not just leading, Zola, you're rewriting history." The words landed like a torch in dry grass, burning away Julian's venomous taunt. "Innovate backward," that had echoed minutes before. Zola's smile, sharp and unyielding, was a blade of its own, slicing through the remnants of his scorn. She stepped forward, her voice clear, cutting, "My charity stunts just changed the game, Julian." The crowd gasped, a wave of shock rippling through silk and satin, her words a direct answer to his insult. Julian's jaw clenched, his eyes darting as if seeking an escape. Blair, her silver gown now a dull sheen, gripped his arm, her face a mask of forced composure. She'd urged him to crush Zola, whispering venom to stoke his pride. But now the room tilted against them. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, shouted, Her programs transformed my company. Others joined, their cheers a rising flame, while Julian's allies shifted, their laughter replaced by murmurs of doubt. The board member who'd fawned over Zola earlier now stood at the stage's edge, his tie askew, voice trembling as he seized the microphone. Blackwood is honored to announce a $100 million donation, he stammered, establishing the Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, funded by Mr. Kaelen Shaw. The hall erupted, gasps, applause, and whispers colliding like sparks in a storm. The screen flashed again, detailing Innovate Forward's impact, empowering women of color in global leadership. Zola stood center stage, her presence a beacon, not a plea for approval. She'd forced Blackwood's hand, her donation tied to demands for diversity curricula, a legacy that would outlast the hall's marble columns. Kaelen stood beside her, not as a savior, but an amplifier, his hand grazing hers, a quiet signal. Your fire burns brightest. The crowd's applause swelled, but it was uneven. Some clapped out of awe, others out of obligation, their world upended by a woman they'd underestimated. Julian's flute slipped, champagne splashing his cuff. His eyes, once sharp with condescension, were hollow, his empire of charm crumbling. He'd mocked Zola's mission, called it a fantasy, but now her name was carved into Blackwood's future. Blair's smile froze, her fingers digging into his arm, her own ambition tarnished by his misstep. You didn't know, she hissed, her voice barely audible, a betrayal cloaked in silk. Julian opened his mouth, a retort forming, but it died as another alum called out, Zola's work is on every global stage. The words stung, each one a reminder of his blindness. Zola didn't gloat. Her gaze swept the room, steady, searing, a fire that needed no fuel. She'd come not to fight Julian, but to claim her truth, a truth now undeniable, projected in bold letters above her. The board member, sweating, continued, The Institute will champion Ms. Vance's vision, equity, leadership, change. The younger crowd roared, their phones already capturing the moment. One alum typing furiously, Zola Vance just owned Blackwood, Black excellence. Julian's allies turned away, their whispers now of damage control, their power slipping like smoke through their fingers. Kaelen's presence, a quiet titan beside Zola, was a verdict. He didn't need to speak again. His entrance, his wealth, his belief in her had shifted the hall's axis. Zola nodded to the crowd, her silence louder than their applause, her gown catching the light like a flame that refused to dim. Julian stood, a shadow in his own kingdom, watching the woman he'd scorned become its center. The oak doors behind him stood open, their groan a fading echo, but the inferno Zola and Kaelen had ignited was only beginning to burn. You picked the wrong side, Blair. A donor's curt dismissal sliced through the Blackwood Grand Hall's fading applause, his eyes cold as he brushed past Blair, her silver gown now a tarnished sheen in the chandelier's flicker. Zola Vance stood center stage, her royal blue gown a smoldering ember, her sleek black hair a defiant crown against the screen, still blazing with Innovate Forward's metrics. 1.5 M women empowered, 3B education impact. The crowd's cheers lingered, but the air was thick with a new tension. Julian Croft's empire of charm was crumbling, and Blair's calculated poise was cracking beside him. Julian's face, once sharp with condescension, was a mask of ash, his champagne flute forgotten, its contents staining the marble floor. Zola's gaze, a molten blade, met his for a fleeting moment, not with triumph, but with a verdict. You're irrelevant. The hall buzzed, a hive of whispers and shifting allegiances. Julian's Wall Street allies who'd laughed at his taunt, innovate backward, moments before, now averted their eyes, their smirks replaced by nervous glances. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, clutched her phone, her ex-post already gaining traction. Zola Vance just owned Blackwood, round black excellence. The words spread like wildfire, each retweet a spark igniting Julian's humiliation beyond the hall's gilded walls. Donors who'd once courted his deals drifted toward Zola, their handshakes eager, their voices low with awe. Ms. Vance, your institute will change everything. She nodded, her silence a fire that needed no fuel, her presence a beacon that outshone their flattery. Blair's fingers dug into Julian's arm, her smile a brittle facade. "Fix this," she hissed, her voice a desperate ember beneath her polished exterior. She'd urged him to crush Zola, whispering venom to stoke his pride, but now her own ambition was singed by his misstep. She stepped toward a cluster of donors, her laugh forced, her gown catching light like a fading star. "Julian was just joking earlier," she said, her voice too bright, too thin. The donor's reply was ice. "You picked the wrong side, Blair." Her smile faltered, her eyes darting to Zola, who stood unmoved, a pillar of fire in a room that no longer belonged to them. Blair's world, built on proximity to power, was unraveling, her elegance no match for Zola's undeniable truth. Julian's breath hitched, his jaw clenching as he watched the crowd orbit Zola. He'd mocked her as a dreamer, a fraud, but the screen above, its numbers unassailable, proved her a titan. The Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, funded by Kaelen Shaw's $100 million, wasn't just a donation. It was a monument to her vision, one he'd dismissed as charity stunts. His allies, once loyal, now whispered of his blunder. He didn't know who he was messing with. A former classmate, now a tech entrepreneur, leaned toward another. "Her programs are reshaping my boardroom." Julian's hand trembled, the weight of his mistake a flame licking at his pride. He opened his mouth, a weak defense forming, but the words died as Zola's gaze swept past him, dismissing him without effort. Kaelen stood beside Zola, his navy suit a quiet contrast to her radiance, his presence a steady inferno amplifying hers. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His entrance had shifted the hall's axis, his wealth and belief in Zola, a verdict on Julian's irrelevance. The board member, still sweating, hovered nearby, murmuring to a colleague, "Her conditions, diversity, equity, are rewriting our curriculum." Zola's influence wasn't just personal, it was systemic, a fire burning through Blackwood's outdated foundations. A young woman, inspired by Zola's work, approached, her voice trembling. "Ms. Vance, you showed me I can lead without shrinking." Zola's smile softened, a spark of connection. "Keep rising," she said, her words a quiet command that echoed louder than the hall's applause. Julian's allies drifted further, their handshakes now offered to Kaelen, their smiles forced. Blair's eyes narrowed, her composure fracturing as she realized her own status was tied to Julian's sinking ship. She tried again, approaching another donor, her voice saccharine. "We're thrilled for Blackwood's future." The donor turned away, muttering, "Align with winners next time." The rejection stung, a public wound that mirrored Julian's. He stood frozen, a shadow in a hall he once ruled, his pride reduced to cinders. Zola didn't look back. Her fire had burned brighter than his scorn, and the room knew it. The screen above flickered, its metrics a relentless reminder. Zola's work wasn't a dream, it was a revolution. The X post gained millions of views, its hashtag trending globally. Black excellence. Julian's name, once a badge of power, now trended for all the wrong reasons. Zola and Kaelen stood as one, their silhouettes a promise of what was to come. The hall's chatter faded, but the fire they'd ignited burned on, ready to consume the last of Julian's world. "I turned their stage to ashes, Kaelen." Zola Vance's voice, fierce and unbroken, cut through the hum of the car as she leaned back, her royal blue gown catching the city's neon pulse through the tinted windows. Kaelen Shaw, his navy suit still sharp as a blade, gripped her hand, his dark eyes glinting with a pride that burned hotter than the Blackwood Grand Hall's chandeliers. "You didn't just win, Zola," he said, his low rumble a spark to her fire. "You redefined their world." Their silhouettes, framed against San Francisco's starlit skyline, were a portrait of unyielding power, a testament to the inferno they'd ignited. The hall's gilded walls, Julian Croft's shattered pride, and Blair's crumbling ambition lay behind them, reduced to embers in the wake of Zola's triumph. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, the screen alight with notifications. The X post from the young alum, Zola Vance, just owned Blackwood. Black excellence had exploded, Millions of views pouring in, retweets spreading like wildfire across continents. Comments flooded, "She shut down Wall Street arrogance," and "Her institute's changing the game." The hashtag trended globally, a digital blaze that carried Zola's name from the hall to the world. She scrolled, her lips curving as she read a message from a young woman in Nairobi. "Your work gave me courage to lead." Zola's heart flared, not with pride but purpose. This wasn't about Julian's defeat, it was about the women she'd lifted, the futures she'd forged. Back in the hall, Julian stood alone, a shadow amidst the fading clatter of champagne flutes. His tailored suit, once a badge of dominance, hung heavy, stained with the champagne he'd spilled in his shock. The screen's metrics, 1.5 mm, women empowered, 3B education impact, still burned in his mind, a relentless reminder of Zola's power. His allies had scattered, their handshakes withdrawn, their whispers now of his misstep. He mocked her? She's untouchable. Blair had slipped away, her silver gown a ghost in the crowd, her final words to him a hiss. "You dragged us both down." Julian's jaw clenched, his pride a pile of ash. He'd thought Blackwood was his kingdom, but Zola had turned it into her arena, and he was the fool left standing in its ruins. Zola leaned against Kaelen, the car's leather cool against her skin. "This wasn't revenge," she said, her voice steady but alive with fire. "It was for every woman told to shrink." Kalen's nod was silent, his hand a steady anchor. He'd never sought the spotlight, his billionaire status a tool, not a crown. At Blackwood, his entrance had been a spark, his $100 million donation a flame. But it was Zola's vision, the Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, that burned brightest. "They'll talk about tonight for years," he said, a grin tugging at his lips. "But you're just getting started." The city's lights streaked past, each one a star in Zola's constellation. She thought of the young alum, her African print dress vibrant, her words a vow, "You showed me I can lead." Zola's work wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was lives transformed, from boardrooms in Accra to classrooms in Chicago. The ex-post's reach grew, comments pouring in from women she'd never met. "I'm applying for your program. You're my hero." Each message was a spark, kindling a movement that Julian's world could never contain. Zola's fingers tightened around Kalen's, her resolve a blaze that no one could extinguish. In Manhattan, Julian sat in his penthouse, the city's glow mocking him through floor-to-ceiling windows. His phone was silent, his inbox empty of the usual deal offers. The ex-post had branded him a fool, his name trending alongside Zola's, but for all the wrong reasons. Donors he'd courted now praised her institute, their emails citing equity and envision, words he'd once scoffed at. Blair's absence stung, her social media dark, her ambitions severed by his failure. He poured a whiskey, its burn no match for the fire Zola had unleashed. He'd thought he could bury her, but she'd buried him, her legacy a flame that would outlast his empire. Zola closed her eyes, the car's hum a rhythm to her thoughts. She saw the women her programs had lifted, mothers, students, leaders, each one a spark in her revolution. The Blackwood Hall, with its chandeliers and elites, was a fading memory, its power dwarfed by the world she was building. "They thought they could dim me," she murmured, her voice a quiet inferno. Kalen's hand squeezed hers, his silence a promise. "You're unstoppable." The ex-post's glow lit her screen, its reach a testament to her fire. She wasn't just leaving Blackwood behind. She was lighting a path forward, one that would burn brighter than any hall could contain. "Leadership means lifting all, and I'm here to ensure it." Zola Vance's voice rang clear across the Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, its sleek halls alive with the hum of ambition. The Blackwood campus, once a gilded cage of exclusion, now pulsed with purpose, its walls lined with screens flashing Innovate Forward's metrics, 1.5 M women empowered, 3B education impact. Her royal blue dress, a nod to the gown that had blazed at the reunion, shimmered under the Institute's skylights, her sleek black hair a crown of unwavering resolve. The audience, global leaders, students, and educators, hung on her words, their applause a rising flame. Zola stood not as a guest in their world, but as its architect, her vision of equity and leadership etched into every corner of this new legacy. The Institute's opening marked a triumph far beyond the Blackwood Grand Hall's fleeting drama. That night when Julian Croft's scorn had met Kaelen Shaw's thunderous entrance, it had been a spark. This was the inferno. Zola's speech wove a vision of a world where women of color led without apology, their voices amplified by programs she'd built from the ashes of doubt. A young woman, her braids vibrant against her blazer, approached after the speech, eyes gleaming with fire. "Ms. Vance, you showed me I don't have to shrink," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "I'm leading a startup now because of your programs." Zola's smile, warm yet unyielding, was a spark passed forward. "Keep burning bright," she said, her words a vow that echoed through the hall. Kaelen stood at the crowd's edge, his navy suit a quiet contrast to the room's energy, his pride a steady ember. He'd never sought the spotlight, his billionaire status a tool to amplify Zola's fire, not overshadow it. Their partnership, forged in shared purpose, had turned Blackwood's elitism into a platform for change. The Institute's curriculum, shaped by Innovate Forward's equity mandates, was training a new generation, women from Chicago to Accra, their leadership redefining boardrooms and governments. Kaelen's gaze met Zola's, a silent promise. "Your light is unstoppable." She nodded, her heart a furnace of purpose, knowing this was only the beginning. Across the world, the X post from that reunion night still burned, its hashtag, Chakwan, Black Excellence, alive with millions of voices. Messages poured in, a teacher in Lagos inspired to start a leadership program, a student in Harlem applying to the Institute, a CEO in London citing Zola's work in her keynote. Each was a spark, kindling a movement that Julian's world could never contain. Zola scrolled through her phone backstage, her lips curving as she read a comment. Zola Vance didn't just win, she changed the game. The reunion's echoes had faded, but its fire had spread, a global blaze no one could extinguish. In Manhattan, Julian sat in his dim penthouse, the city's skyline a cold mockery through his windows. His phone was silent, his once buzzing network reduced to whispers of his blunder. The X post had branded him a relic, his name a cautionary tale beside Zola's rising star. Donors who'd once flocked to him now funded her institute, their emails praising equity and vision, words he'd mocked as naive. Blair was gone, her social media silent, her ambition severed by his failure. He poured a whiskey, its burn hollow compared to the inferno Zola had unleashed. He'd thought he could bury her, but she'd built a legacy that buried him, its flames outlasting his fated empire. Zola walked the Institute's halls, her heels clicking like sparks on marble. Portraits of women she'd mentored lined the walls. Leaders, educators, changemakers, each a testament to her revolution. She paused at a screen displaying a new metric, 2M Women Empowered. Her work wasn't numbers, it was lives, stories, futures. The young woman's words echoed in her mind. "I don't have to shrink." Zola had once folded herself to fit Julian's world, her dreams dimmed by his scorn. Now she stood unbowed, her fire a beacon for those who'd been told to fade. The audience lingered, their chatter a hum of possibility. A professor approached, her voice reverent. "Your institute is reshaping how we teach leadership." Zola nodded, her gaze steady. "It's not about leading alone," she said. "It's about lifting others." Her words, simple yet searing, carried the weight of her journey, from Blackwood's sneers to this moment, where her name was a movement. The X post's glow still lit her phone, its reach a reminder. Her fire had sparked a global blaze. Kaelen joined her, his hand grazing hers, a quiet anchor. "You've built something eternal," he said, his voice low but fierce. Zola's eyes burned with purpose, not pride. She wasn't here to bask, she was here to forge. The Institute was her legacy, but its true power lay in the women it would lift, the worlds it would reshape. As she stepped into the hall's light, her silhouette was aflame, unquenchable, undeniable, a fire that would burn for generations. Thank you for walking with Zola Vance through her blazing triumph, from Julian's scorn to a legacy that reshapes the world. Her fire sparks a question. Have you ever risen above doubt to claim your space? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters. We're grateful for your journey with us and look forward to sharing more stories that inspire. Until next time, keep burning bright. They're not my sons should be white. Ethan Marshall's voice thunders through the sterile Brooklyn hospital room, his finger jabbing accusingly at Aisha Brooks and her newborn twins, Malik and Jaden. Their dark skin, a rich echo of Aisha's African-American heritage, sparks shame in the billionaire's eyes. Aisha, trembling on the hospital bed, clutches her babies, her heart splintering as tears trace her cheeks. Ethan's words sear, yet her gaze hardens, defiant. Will Aisha rise from this betrayal? Can her sons reclaim their truth? A journey of justice awaits, woven with Harlem's vibrant soul. Subscribe to our channel, share where and when you're tuning in, and rate this story. 1 for gripping, 0 if it falls flat. What's your prediction for their triumph? Will lies crumble? Stay with us to uncover their saga. The echo of Ethan Marshall's venomous words, "They're not my sons," still burned in Aisha Brooks' ears as she lay on the hospital bed, her arms cradling Malik and Jaden. Their tiny dark-skinned bodies, swaddled in soft cotton, pressed against her chest, their warmth a stark contrast to the sterile chill of the Brooklyn ward. Aisha's fingers tightened around the silver necklace Ethan had given her months ago, its delicate chain now a lifeline to her resolve. His towering figure lingered in the doorway, his gray suit pristine, his blue eyes cold as steel. He pointed again, his voice a low growl. "You heard me, Aisha. They're too dark. They'll ruin everything. My name, Vanguard Styles, the upcoming gala. Fix this, or you're done." Aisha's breath hitched, her body aching from labor, but her gaze locked onto Ethan's. The man she'd loved, the billionaire who'd whispered promises in late-night office meetings, now stood as her betrayer. Her heart splintered, not from love lost, but from the weight of his shame. Shame for her son's rich mahogany skin, her own African-American heritage. "You're ashamed of them," she said, her voice trembling but sharp, cutting through the antiseptic air. "You're ashamed of me." Ethan's jaw clenched, his hand dropping. "This isn't personal, Aisha. It's business. Vanguard is luxury, prestige. White-gloved clients don't want this." He gestured vaguely at the twins, his words slicing like a blade. Aisha's eyes flared, her pain igniting into defiance. "This!" she spat, her voice rising. "These are our sons, Ethan. Malik and Jaden. They're perfect, and you're too blind to see it." A nurse, her badge reading Tasha, hesitated at the door, her brown eyes wide with concern. Aisha ignored her, sitting up despite the stab of pain in her abdomen. The twins stirred, Malik letting out a soft whimper. Aisha's hand brushed his cheek, her touch steadying her rage. "You think your gala matters more than them?" she said, her voice now a low, fierce whisper. "Your empire of lies?" Ethan stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking on the linoleum. "You don't get it, do you? The investors, the board, they expect perfection. A black single mother, 2 dark kids? That's not the image I've built." His voice softened, but not with kindness, only calculation. "End this, Aisha, or you'll lose your job, your future. I'll make sure of it." The threat landed like a punch, but Aisha's resolve hardened. She remembered the late nights at Vanguard Styles, her meticulous data analysis fueling Ethan's empire, their stolen moments in his Manhattan office, where he'd called her his muse. Now those memories felt like ash. She clutched the necklace, its silver biting into her palm, no longer a token of love, but a symbol of her fight. "You don't own me, Ethan," she said, her voice steady now. "And you don't own them? We don't need you." Ethan's face twitched, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. He opened his mouth, but Aisha cut him off. "Get out." Her words were a command, not a plea, her eyes blazing with a fire born of betrayal. Tasha, the nurse, stepped forward, her voice firm. "Sir, you need to leave. Now." Ethan's gaze darted between them, his confidence faltering. He straightened his tie, a nervous tick, and turned toward the door. "You're making a mistake," he muttered, his voice lacking conviction. His footsteps echoed down the corridor, fading into silence. Aisha sank back against the pillows, her breath ragged. Tears threatened, but she bit them back, her jaw tight. Malik and Jaden nestled closer, their tiny hearts beating against hers. She looked down at them, their dark curls peeking from their swaddles, and whispered, "You're enough. We're enough." The words were a vow carved into her soul. Tasha lingered, her hand resting on the bedrail. "You okay, honey?" she asked, her Brooklyn accent warm, grounding. Aisha nodded, though her chest ached. "I will be," she said, her voice soft but resolute. Tasha's eyes softened, recognizing the strength in Aisha's pain. "You're a fighter. Those boys are lucky to have you." Aisha's gaze drifted to the window, where Brooklyn's skyline loomed under a gray dawn. The city pulsed with life. Street vendors, jazz notes floating from distant clubs, the heartbeat of Harlem just beyond. She thought of her mother, who'd raised her alone in a cramped apartment, weaving stories of resilience and pride. Aisha's fingers traced the necklace, its silver glinting faintly. Ethan had given it to her in a moment of tenderness, but now it was hers, a talisman of survival, not his claim. She imagined the challenges ahead, the whispers at Vanguard, the struggle to keep her job, the nights she'd work to feed her sons. But in Harlem, she'd find strength. Community markets with kente cloth stalls, elders like her mother who'd fought and thrived. Aisha kissed Malik's forehead, then Jaden's, their warmth fueling her fire. "We'll build our own empire," she whispered, her voice a promise to the city, to her sons, to herself. The hospital room grew quiet, save for the twins' soft breaths. Aisha's heart steadied, her pain forging into purpose. Ethan's world of galas and lies would not define her. She was Aisha Brooks, daughter of Harlem, mother of Malik and Jaden, and she would rise. Aisha Brooks' sneakers scuffed the worn linoleum of her Harlem apartment, the faint hum of a jazz trumpet seeping through the thin walls from a neighbor's radio. Malik and Jaden, now 3 months old, slept in their shared crib, their dark curls peeking out from soft blankets. Aisha's hands trembled as she pinned a pattern to a swatch of kente cloth, its vibrant gold and red threads, a defiant splash of heritage against the gray of her reality. Ethan's words, "They'll ruin everything," still clawed at her heart, but she shoved them down, her fingers gripping the silver necklace that hung heavy around her neck. No longer a lover's gift, it was her anchor, a reminder of the vow she'd made to her sons. Her desk, cluttered with fabric scraps and a borrowed laptop, glowed with an online fashion design course. Vanguard Styles had demoted her to data entry, slashing her pay to a pittance, but Aisha refused to break. She worked nights, her eyes burning from spreadsheets, then stitched until dawn, teaching herself to weave dreams into cloth. "You're enough," she whispered to the sleeping twins, her voice a soft echo of that hospital promise. The city outside thrummed, Harlem's pulse of laughter, street vendors, and distant saxophones. But inside, Aisha fought a quieter battle. The rent was late again. Bills piled up like accusations, each one a reminder of Ethan's threat. "You'll lose your future." She'd kept her job at Vanguard, swallowing the humiliation of fetching coffee for colleagues who once respected her data analysis. But Harlem gave her strength. At the community center down the block, she found a flyer for a sewing workshop led by Mrs. Ruby Carter, a legendary tailor whose designs had once graced Black-owned boutiques in the 80s. Aisha tucked the flyer into her pocket, her heart stirring with possibility. Saturday morning, she bundled Malik and Jaden into a stroller, their tiny hands clutching stuffed lions she'd sewn from fabric scraps. The community center buzzed with life, elders swapping stories, kids sketching on butcher paper, a jazz quartet warming up in the corner. Mrs. Ruby stood at a table draped with kente and Ankara cloth, her silver braids gleaming under fluorescent lights. Her eyes, sharp yet warm, landed on Aisha. "You look like you've got a fire in you, child," she said, her voice rich with a Brooklyn lilt. "What's it burning for?" Aisha hesitated, the weight of Ethan's betrayal pressing against her ribs. "For them," she said, nodding toward her sons. "I'm Aisha Brooks. I want to learn to make something of my own." Ruby's gaze softened, but her smile was fierce. "You're in the right place. Harlem's been building dreams from ashes forever." She handed Aisha a needle and thread, gesturing to a bolt of kente. Start here. This cloth carries our stories. Make it sing. As Aisha stitched, Ruby shared her own tale. I designed for boutiques, back when folks thought black fashion couldn't shine. Got pushed out by big names like Vanguard. Her voice hardened. They don't want our light, but we shine anyway. Aisha's needle paused, Ruby's words striking a chord. She thought of Vanguard's glossy runways built on stolen brilliance. Did you ever fight back? She asked, her voice low. Ruby chuckled, bitter but proud. Every stitch was my fight. You'll find yours too. She showed Aisha how to weave kente's bold patterns into a jacket, her hands steady, guiding. Malik giggled, waving his lion, and Jaden babbled, mimicking the jazz quartet's rhythm. Aisha's heart swelled. Their innocence fueled her. She imagined dressing them in her designs, their dark skin radiant against gold and crimson threads. Back home, Aisha worked late, her laptop screen casting shadows as she studied draping techniques. The jazz from next door bled into her thoughts, its soulful wail echoing her resolve. She sketched a dress inspired by the kente Ruby loved, its lines bold yet elegant, like Harlem itself. But exhaustion crept in. Her bank account was nearly empty, and Vanguard's demotion felt like a noose. She touched the necklace, its silver cool against her skin. We don't need him, she murmured, glancing at her son's crib. Ethan's empire loomed, but she'd carve her own. A knock startled her. Her neighbor, Miss Lena, poked her head in, holding a plate of cornbread. You burning the midnight oil again? She teased, her eyes kind. Aisha smiled, weary but grateful. Trying to keep up with these boys? Lena glanced at the kente scraps. You're building something big, Aisha. Harlem sees you. The words wrapped around her like a quilt, warm and grounding. As Lena left, Aisha returned to her sketch. The dress took shape, fierce, unapologetic, a testament to her roots. She thought of Ruby's story, of Vanguard's polished lies. A memory flickered. An old storage room at work, filled with forgotten files. Could there be secrets buried there? She shook her head, too tired to chase the thought tonight. But the seed was planted, her fire growing. Malik stirred, his tiny hand reaching for Jaden's. Aisha kissed their foreheads, her vow renewing. We'll rise, she whispered, the jazz outside swelling like a battle cry. Harlem's heartbeat pulsed through her, and she knew this was only the beginning. Aisha Brooks's fingers brushed the cold metal of a filing cabinet, the air in Vanguard Style's basement storage room thick with dust and secrets. The faint pulse of Harlem's jazz, a memory from her apartment, still hummed in her veins. But here in the bowels of Manhattan's fashion empire, silence reigned. Her demotion to data entry had landed her this grunt work, sorting old files for the company's digital archive. But the seed planted nights ago, when she'd sketched that kente-inspired dress, had taken root. Something was hidden here. She felt it. Malik and Jaden's laughter, their tiny hands clutching her sewn lions, fueled her. She clutched the silver necklace, its weight a reminder of her vow. We'll rise. The storage room was a maze of cardboard boxes and outdated tech, relics of Vanguard's climb to glory. Aisha's flashlight beam danced across labels faded by time, her heart pounding as she recalled Mrs. Ruby's words, "They don't want our light." Ruby's tale of being pushed out by big fashion houses gnawed at her, mirroring her own humiliation under Ethan's thumb. She'd kept her job, barely, but every sidelong glance from colleagues stung. Her hands, calloused from late-night sewing, rifled through a box marked 1990s archives. Inside, an old hard drive caught her eye, its surface scratched, but intact. Her gut twisted. This wasn't just junk. Plugging the drive into a dusty computer, Aisha's breath caught as files flickered to life. Sketches vibrant and bold filled the screen. Dresses and suits with patterns that echoed the kente cloth Ruby had shown her, but sharper, infused with a soul she recognized. The name Denise Harper was scrawled in digital ink, dated over a decade ago. Aisha's eyes widened. These designs were the backbone of Vanguard's iconic 2000s collections, the ones that had crowned Ethan's empire. Her fingers trembled as she opened a text file, a journal entry from Denise. My designs, my heart, stolen by Laura Bennett. They fired me, silenced me, because my blackness didn't fit their world. Aisha's chest tightened, rage simmering beneath her exhaustion. Denise's words were a mirror. Her own blackness had been Ethan's excuse to reject Malik and Jaden. She scrolled further, finding a grainy video clip. Denise's face appeared, her eyes fierce yet weary, speaking to a colleague. Laura took my sketches, said they'd never sell from a black woman. I fought, but they crushed me. The video cut off, but Aisha's pulse roared. This was theft, a betrayal deeper than her own. Footsteps echoed behind her. Aisha spun, clutching the hard drive. Tyrone Jackson, a janitor who'd once shared coffee breaks with her in better days, leaned against the doorframe. His graying beard framed a knowing smile. You found something, didn't you? He said, his voice low, Harlem's cadence warm but cautious. Aisha hesitated, then nodded. Denise Harper. They stole her work. Tyrone's eyes darkened. I knew Denise. Brilliant, fierce, like you. Laura and Ethan forced her to sign a gag order, paid her pennies to disappear. He stepped closer, glancing at the drive. You keep digging. They'll come for you. Aisha's grip on the necklace tightened, its silver biting her palm. Let them try, she said, her voice a quiet blade. I'm not Denise. I won't stay silent. Tyrone chuckled, but worry creased his brow. Careful, Aisha. Laura's got eyes everywhere. He handed her a crumpled business card for Denise, now a tailor in Queens. Find her. She's got more to tell. Aisha pocketed the card, her mind racing. Back home, she'd pore over the drive. But here, in Vanguard's shadows, she felt the weight of a fight bigger than herself. As she locked the storage room, a chill ran down her spine. A figure lingered at the hallway's end. Laura Bennett, her blonde hair stark under fluorescent lights, her eyes narrowing. Working late, Aisha? Laura's voice was smooth, venomous. Aisha's heart skipped, but she squared her shoulders. Just doing my job, she said, her tone steady despite the hard drive burning a hole in her bag. Laura's smile didn't reach her eyes. Don't wander where you don't belong. Aisha walked away, her steps deliberate, but Laura's gaze bored into her back. In the elevator, she exhaled, the necklace cool against her skin. Harlem waited outside, its streetlights and jazz notes a beacon. She thought of Malik and Jaden, their crayons scattered across her apartment floor, their drawings of lions and stars mirroring her own sketches. They were her fire, her reason to fight. At home, she tucked the twins into their crib, their soft snores grounding her. She opened the hard drive again, Denise's sketches glowing on her laptop. Each line screamed of a stolen legacy, a black woman's brilliance erased. Aisha's fingers traced the kente patterns she'd learned from Ruby, her resolve hardening. This is for you, Denise, she whispered, and for my boys. A text buzzed her phone, an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll lose more than your job. Aisha's breath caught, but she deleted the message, her jaw set. Laura's threats wouldn't break her. Harlem's spirit, Ruby's wisdom, and her son's futures fueled her. She'd find Denise, unearth the truth, and make Vanguard pay. The fight had just begun. Aisha Brooks's heart pounded as she stepped off the subway in Queens, the crumpled business card from Tyrone clutched in her hand. The address led to a small tailor shop, its window adorned with vibrant kente fabrics that shimmered like Harlem's soul. Malik and Jaden's laughter echoed in her mind, their crayon-drawn lions a beacon against the fear sparked by Laura Bennett's cold stare and that anonymous text. Stop digging. Aisha's fingers grazed the silver necklace, its weight grounding her. She'd uncovered Denise Harper's stolen legacy in Vanguard's dusty archives, and now, standing before this shop, she felt the pulse of a fight bigger than her own. Inside, Denise Harper, a woman in her late 50s, worked at a sewing machine, her hands deft despite the lines etched by years of struggle. Her eyes, dark and piercing, met Aisha's with a mix of wariness and recognition. You're the one Tyrone sent, Denise said, her voice low, carrying the cadence of a survivor. Aisha nodded, pulling the hard drive from her bag. I found your designs, Miss Harper. Vanguard stole them. Laura Bennett, Ethan Marshall. I need to know more. Denise's hands stilled, her gaze dropping to the kente cloth on her table. They took everything, she said, her voice a raw whisper. My sketches, my soul. Laura said my blackness wouldn't sell, forced me to sign a gag order or lose my home. She handed Aisha a worn sketchbook, its pages filled with bold designs, dresses that echoed Vanguard's iconic lines but pulsed with African-American heritage, patterns Aisha recognized from Mrs. Ruby's lessons. A sketch caught her eye, a gown with kente-inspired swirls captioned, "For my daughter never born." Aisha's throat tightened, thinking of Malik and Jaden, her own fight for them. You're risking a lot, Denise warned, her eyes searching Aisha's. Laura's ruthless. She'll come for your boys. Aisha's grip on the sketchbook tightened, her resolve flaring. She won't touch them, she said, her voice ablade. I'm fighting for us all. Denise's lips curved into a faint, fierce smile. Then take this. It's my truth. She pressed the sketchbook into Aisha's hands, a silent pact forged. Back in Manhattan, Aisha's nerves jangled as she entered a Soho cafe to meet Keisha, her journalist friend. The air buzzed with the clink of espresso cups, but a shadow fell across her table. Laura Bennett stood there, her blonde hair gleaming, her smile venomous. You're out of your depth, Aisha, Laura said, her voice silk over steel. Keep poking around, and those sweet boys of yours, Malik and Jaden, right, might pay the price. Aisha's blood ran cold, her hand instinctively clutching the necklace. Laura knew their names. The anonymous text flashed in her mind, now unmistakably Laura's work. You don't scare me, Aisha lied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. She stood, meeting Laura's gaze. I know what you did to Denise. The world will too. Laura's smile faltered, but she leaned closer, her perfume sharp. You're a data clerk, Aisha, a nobody from Harlem. I have lawyers, power. You'll lose everything. She turned on her heel, her stilettos clicking like a warning shot. Aisha's knees buckled as she sank back into her chair. Keisha arrived, her notepad ready, her eyes narrowing at Aisha's pale face. What happened? She asked, her Brooklyn accent thick with concern. Aisha recounted Laura's threat, her voice shaking but resolute. She knows about my boys, Keisha. But I've got Denise's sketchbook. We're exposing Vanguard. Keisha's pen flew across the page, her jaw set. I'm with you. This story's bigger than them. That evening, Aisha pushed Malik and Jaden's stroller through a Harlem street festival, the air alive with jazz horns and the scent of jerk chicken from food stalls. Vibrant kente banners fluttered above vendors selling beaded jewelry and African-inspired art. Mrs. Ruby stood at a booth, her silver braids catching the firelight of a nearby drum circle. You look like you've seen a ghost, Ruby said, her eyes sharp. Aisha confessed Laura's threat, her voice low to shield her son's ears. Malik giggled, waving his lion toy, while Jaden clapped to the drum beat. Ruby's face hardened, but her hand gripped Aisha's. Harlem's fought worse than Laura Bennett, she said. Your boys are our boys. Keep going, Aisha. She handed Aisha a kente swatch, its gold threads gleaming. Sew this into your work. Let it carry our strength. Aisha nodded, her fear melting into fire. The festival's energy, elders dancing, children laughing, wrapped around her like armor. At home, Aisha tucked the twins into their crib, their tiny hands clutching her fingers. She opened Denise's sketchbook, its pages a testament to a stolen dream. Laura's threat echoed, but so did Ruby's words. Aisha's fingers traced the necklace, her vow burning brighter. She'd meet Keisha tomorrow, plan their next move. Vanguard's lies would crumble, and her sons would see a mother who fought. Harlem's rhythm pulsed outside, a call to battle she'd answer. Malik Brooks leaned over a drafting table at Pratt Institute, his pencil sketching a jacket with kente-inspired swirls, each line a tribute to the Harlem Festival's firelight that still burned in his memory. At 18, his broad shoulders carried his mother's defiance, but his eyes flickered with a restless anger. Across the studio, Jaden, his twin, hunched over a laptop, his fingers dancing across keys to refine a digital print pulsing with jazz rhythms. The brothers, now students of fashion and graphic design, had inherited Aisha's fire, but Laura Bennett's threat, those sweet boys of yours, hung like a shadow. Aisha's silver necklace, now split into two pendants shared between them, glinted on their chests, a silent vow to fight. In their dorm, Denise Harper's sketchbook lay open, its pages a testament to a stolen legacy. Malik's voice was tight as he paced. "We've got her designs, Jaden. Mom's got the hard drive. We take this to Fashion Week. Expose Vanguard now." His fist clenched, the pendant swinging. Jaden's brow furrowed, his quieter nature wrestling with caution. "We need more proof, Malik. Laura's got lawyers, connections. What if she comes for Mom?" His voice cracked, betraying fear for Aisha, still toiling at Vanguard's data entry desk. Malik stopped, his jaw tight. "You think waiting makes us safe? Laura knows our names. She's already coming." He slammed the sketchbook shut, its thud echoing their mother's pain. Ethan's rejection, Laura's venom in that Soho cafe. Jaden stood, his eyes fierce but steady. "I'm not scared for us, Malik. I'm scared for her. She's fought enough." The brothers locked eyes, their bond strained by diverging instincts. Malik's fire, Jaden's caution. Aisha's voice broke the tension, calling from the dorm's doorway. "You two fighting again?" Her tone was soft but firm, her presence grounding them like Harlem's jazz. She stepped inside, her coat dusted with city grit, the silver necklace's absence a reminder of her gift to her sons. "We fight together, not against each other," she said, her eyes scanning their faces. Malik slumped, guilt softening his edges. "Laura threatened you, Mom. Named us. We can't let her win." Jaden nodded, clutching his pendant. "But we need a plan, not just anger." Aisha's lips curved, pride mixing with worry. "You're my boys. We'll find a way." Their plan took shape with Maya Carter, their Pratt professor, a former Vanguard intern with a sharp mind and sharper tongue. In her office, surrounded by mood boards and jazz vinyls, Maya studied Denise's sketchbook. "These designs built Vanguard's empire," she said, her voice low. "I saw Laura hoard sketches back then, but I was too junior to speak." Her fingers tapped the hard drive Aisha had brought, now loaded with Denise's files. "There's an email here, buried deep. Laura admitting she took Denise's work to cleanse it for the market." "It's damning." Malik's eyes blazed. "That's it. We show it at Fashion Week." Jaden hesitated, his pendant glinting. "It's not enough. They'll bury it with lawyers." Maya leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Dig deeper. Vanguard's old servers might have more. I know a guy. Hacker, discreet." Aisha's heart raced, Laura's threat echoing. "Malik and Jaden, right?" She nodded. "Do it, but keep my boys safe." That night, in their Harlem apartment, Aisha stitched a kente-lined vest, its gold threads catching the lamplight. Malik and Jaden sprawled on the floor, sketching designs inspired by Denise and Mrs. Ruby's lessons. The radio played Coltrane, its soulful wail mirroring their resolve. But a buzz from Aisha's phone shattered the calm. An unknown number. "Your sons are talented. Shame if they got hurt." Her breath caught, the words a knife. She deleted the text, her hands shaking, but didn't tell the boys. They didn't need fear. They needed her strength. Malik noticed her pause. "What's wrong, Mom?" His voice was sharp, protective. Aisha forced a smile, threading her needle. "Just tired, baby. Keep drawing." Jaden's eyes lingered, sensing her lie, but he returned to his laptop, his digital print now a bold jazz spiral. Aisha's heart ached. Her boys were growing into warriors, but Laura's shadow loomed larger. She thought of Mrs. Ruby's words at the festival. Harlem's fought worse. The community's strength, its vendors, drummers, elders, pulsed in her veins. She met Keisha at a Harlem diner the next day, slipping her Denise's sketchbook. "This is our weapon," Isha said, her voice low. Keisha's pen scratched furiously, her eyes alight. "I'll dig into Laura's past. If there's dirt, I'll find it." Aisha nodded, her pendant-lace neck feeling bare, but her resolve ironclad. Back home, Malik and Jaden presented their Fashion Week sketches, bold, unapologetic, rooted in Harlem's soul. Aisha's eyes stung with pride. "You're my legacy," she said, her voice breaking. As Coltrane's notes faded, Aisha clutched the vest, its kente threads a promise. Laura's threats wouldn't stop her. With Maya's hacker, Keisha's pen, and her son's fire, she'd unearth Vanguard's lies. Harlem's rhythm beat on, and Aisha knew. The storm was coming, but they'd face it together. Malik Brooks adjusted the kente line jacket draped over his shoulders, its gold threads catching the spotlight's glare as he stepped onto the New York Fashion Week stage. Jaden, at his side, clutched a tablet, his digital print of jazz-inspired spirals pulsing on a massive screen behind them. The crowd, fashion elites, critics, and Harlem's proud contingent, held its breath, the air electric with anticipation. Their pendants, halves of Aisha's silver necklace, glinted under the lights, tying them to her vow. Laura Bennett's threat, shame if they got hurt, echoed in Malik's mind, but his jaw set firm. Tonight, they'd tear down Vanguard-style's empire of lies, for Denise Harper, for their mother, for Harlem. The runway thrummed with a jazz quartet's soulful wail, their notes weaving through the brothers' collection, echoes of Harlem. Models strode in bold designs, kente swirls, ankara patterns, and sleek lines that screamed defiance. Malik's voice boomed through the microphone, steady despite his racing pulse. "This isn't just fashion," he said, eyes scanning the crowd. "It's truth. Vanguard Styles built its empire on stolen dreams." Jaden tapped his tablet, and the screen flared with Denise's sketches from the hard drive. Their vibrant kente-inspired lines undeniable. Gasps rippled through the audience. Jaden's voice, softer but fierce, cut through. Denise Harper, a black designer, created these. Laura Bennett stole them, erased her, because her blackness didn't fit. He swiped, and an email flashed. Laura's words, "We took Harper's work, cleansed it for the market." The crowd erupted in murmurs, cameras flashing like lightning. Ethan Marshall in the front row froze, his face ashen, his tailored suit no shield against the truth. Laura beside him gripped her clutch, her lips a tight line. Malik's heart pounded, but he pressed on. "Denise's legacy is ours. Harlem's, Black America's." He gestured to the models, their dark skin radiant against the fabrics. A figure emerged from the wings. Mr. Carter, the former Vanguard employee, his gray hair stark under the lights. His voice trembled but carried weight. "I saw it," he said, unscripted, his Harlem accent grounding every word. "Laura took Denise's sketches, laughed when they fired her. I stayed silent too long. No more." The crowd roared, Harlem's contingent, elders, artists, Mrs. Ruby among them, standing, their cheers a tidal wave. Aisha in the wings clutched her hands, the absence of her necklace a reminder of her gift to her sons. Her eyes burned with pride, tears threatening as Malik and Jaden stood tall, their designs a battle cry. Mrs. Ruby, in the audience, raised a fist, her silver braids gleaming, her voice joining the chant. "Denise! Denise!" The jazz quartet swelled, their horns a triumphant call, echoing Harlem's street festivals. Aisha's heart soared. She'd raised warriors. Laura leapt to her feet, her voice shrill. "Lies! They're opportunists!" Her heels wobbled, her composure cracking as cameras turned on her. Ethan grabbed her arm, hissing, "Sit down!" But the crowd drowned her out, their boos a verdict. Malik locked eyes with Laura, his pendant glinting. "You stole a black woman's soul," he said, his voice low, cutting. Jaden stepped forward, his tablet raised. "And we're giving it back." The screen looped Denise's sketches, each one a wound laid bare. Aisha's breath caught as she spotted Keisha in the press pit, her camera flashing, her notepad scribbling furiously. Keisha's eyes met hers, a silent promise. This goes global. The Harlem contingent's cheers grew louder, their voices carrying the rhythm of drum circles, the pulse of their community. Aisha remembered Ruby's words. Harlem's fought worse. Her boys were fighting now, and she'd never been prouder. But danger lingered. As the crowd roared, Aisha noticed a man in a dark jacket at the venue's edge, his eyes fixed on Malik and Jaden. Her stomach twisted. Laura's doing? The anonymous texts flashed in her mind, their menace now a shadow in the spotlight. She stepped closer to the stage, her maternal instinct flaring. "Stay sharp, boys," she whispered, though they couldn't hear. The jazz horns hit a fevered pitch, mirroring her pulse. Malik and Jaden bowed, the crowd's applause shaking the hall. Mrs. Ruby led a group of Harlem elders to the stage, their kente scarves vibrant, their presence a shield. "For Denise!" Ruby shouted, and the chant spread, a wildfire of justice. Ethan slumped in his seat, his hands covering his face, the weight of his empire's lies crushing him. Laura stormed toward an exit, but reporters swarmed, their questions like knives. Aisha joined her sons backstage, her arms enveloping them. "You did it," she said, her voice breaking, pride outweighing fear. Malik's eyes burned, defiant. "Not yet, Mom. This is just the start." Jaden nodded, his pendant catching the light. "For Denise. For us." Aisha's heart swelled, but the man in the dark jacket lingered in her mind. Laura's threats weren't empty, and the fight was far from over. As the jazz faded, Harlem's spirit pulsed through the hall, a promise of battles to come. Aisha squeezed her son's hands, their pendants a shared vow. Vanguard's lies were cracking, and they'd keep pushing until the truth shone free. The air in Aisha Brooks' makeshift Brooklyn office buzzed with the aftershock of her son's Fashion Week triumph. Malik and Jaden's pendants, halves of her silver necklace, caught the dim light as they pored over sketches for their next collection, their kente-inspired lines bold with Harlem's fire. Outside, the city hummed, its jazz notes a faint echo of the runway's roar, where they'd exposed Vanguard-style's theft of Denise Harper's designs. Aisha's heart still raced from the crowd's cheers, Mr. Carter's testimony, and Laura Bennett's unraveling. But the shadow of Laura's threat, shame if they got hurt, and the mysterious man in the dark jacket lingered, a chill in her bones. Her phone vibrated, notifications flooding from Keisha's viral article. Vanguard's Lies. A black designer's stolen legacy screamed the headline, detailing Denise's sketches and Laura's damning email, amplified by Mr. Carter's words. Social media erupted. #Justice for Denise trended. Harlem's voices loudest among them. Aisha's chest swelled with pride, but fear gnawed. Laura was cornered, and cornered snakes struck hardest. A knock rattled the door. Aisha tensed, her hand grazing the empty space where her necklace once hung. Malik and Jaden looked up, their eyes sharp. "Who's that?" Malik asked, his voice low, protective. Aisha opened the door, and Ethan Marshall stood there, his tailored suit rumpled, his blue eyes bloodshot. The billionaire who'd rejected her sons in that hospital room now looked broken, a shadow of his former arrogance. "Aisha," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." She crossed her arms, her gaze iron. "You've got nothing I want to hear." Ethan stepped inside, uninvited, his hands raised. "I was wrong," he said, his words stumbling. "About Malik, Jaden? Everything. I'm out. Vanguard's board sacked me. Laura's gone, sued for plagiarism." He pulled a check from his pocket, the sum staggering. "This is for your brand, Harper's Echo. A fresh start. Just don't tell the world I abandoned my sons." Aisha's blood boiled, her sons' faces, Malik's fire, Jaden's caution, flashing in her mind. "You think money buys forgiveness?" she said, her voice ablade. "You rejected them because their skin wasn't white enough for your empire." Malik stood, his pendant glinting, his fists clenched. "You don't get to claim us now," he said, his Harlem accent sharp. Jaden joined him, quieter but resolute. "You chose lies. Live with it." He tore the check, letting the pieces flutter like ash. Ethan's face crumpled, his hands trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but Aisha cut him off. "Your sorry doesn't erase their pain, or mine." She thought of those hospital nights, Malik and Jaden's tiny hands in hers, Harlem's jazz carrying her through. "We don't need your money. Harper's Echo is ours. Built on truth, not your guilt." Ethan staggered back, his eyes hollow. "I wanted to make it right," he mumbled, but Aisha pointed to the door. "Get out." As Ethan's footsteps faded, Keisha burst in, her notepad clutched tight. "Aisha, the story's blowing up," she said, her eyes alight. "I interviewed Mrs. Ruby. She tied Denise's fight to decades of black designers shut out by houses like Vanguard." Aisha nodded, her resolve hardening. Ruby's voice, rich with Harlem's history, had woven their struggle into a larger tapestry. Keisha flipped her notepad, showing a draft. "This goes to print tomorrow. The world's listening. Harlem's leading the charge." Malik and Jaden exchanged glances. Their earlier tension, Malik's impulsiveness, Jaden's caution, melted into unity. "We're not done," Malik said, his voice fierce. "Our next show's for Denise, for Harlem." Jaden nodded, sketching a new design, its jazz spirals bold. Aisha's heart swelled, but a buzz on her phone broke the moment. An unknown number. "You'll regret crossing me." Laura's venom, unmistakable. Aisha's breath caught, the memory of that dark-jacketed man at Fashion Week flashing. She deleted the text, her jaw tight, shielding her sons. That evening, they joined Mrs. Ruby at a Harlem community center, its walls alive with murals of jazz legends and kente patterns. Elders clapped to a drum circle. Kids danced, their laughter a balm. Ruby pulled Aisha aside, her silver braids gleaming. "You're shaking Harlem, child," she said, her voice warm but fierce. "But watch your back. Laura's kind, don't quit." Aisha nodded, her hand brushing the space where her necklace once lay. "We're ready," she said, her eyes on her sons, who sketched with local teens, their designs a fusion of Harlem's soul. Aisha's phone buzzed again. An email from Maya, their Pratt professor. Hacker found more. Laura's emails to investors, admitting she buried Denise to protect Vanguard's image. Aisha's pulse raced. This was dynamite, enough to seal Laura's fate. She showed Keisha, who grinned. "This ends her." Malik and Jaden overheard, their pendants glinting. "Next Fashion Week," Jaden said, his voice steady. "We finish this." As the drum circle's rhythm rose, Aisha felt Harlem's strength in her bones. Laura's threats loomed, but her son's fire, Ruby's wisdom, and Keisha's pen were her armor. Vanguard was crumbling, and Harper's echo would rise. The fight wasn't over, but Aisha knew they'd face it as one. The New York Fashion Week stage pulsed with the rhythm of a Harlem jazz quartet, their horns weaving a triumphant anthem through the packed hall. Aisha Brooks stood backstage, her heart pounding as Malik and Jaden adjusted their kente-lined jackets, their silver pendants, halves of her old necklace, glinting under the spotlights. A year had passed since their explosive reveal had shattered Vanguard styles, exposing Laura Bennett's theft of Denise Harper's designs. Keisha's viral article and the Harlem community's roar had toppled an empire. But Laura's final threat, "You'll regret crossing me," still lingered like a shadow. Tonight, Harper's echo would rise, a testament to their fight, their truth, their roots. The crowd buzzed, fashion critics, Harlem elders, and global press, their anticipation electric. Mrs. Ruby sat front row, her silver braids catching the light, her eyes fierce with pride. Aisha's chest swelled, the absence of her necklace a reminder of her gift to her sons, now 19, their designs a blaze of African-American heritage. Malik's voice echoed through the mic, steady and commanding. "This is Harper's echo," he said, gesturing to the runway. "For Denise Harper, for Harlem, for every voice silenced." Jaden swiped his tablet, projecting a never-before-seen sketch from Denise's book, a gown of kente swirls and jazz-inspired curves. The crowd gasped, their applause a thunderclap. Models strode out, their dark skin radiant against vibrant fabrics, gold-threaded kente, Ankara prints, and sleek silhouettes that sang of Harlem's soul. The jazz quartet's notes soared, mirroring the drum circles of last year's festival. Aisha's eyes stung with tears as she watched her sons, their pendants flashing, their designs a love letter to their community. She thought of Denise's sketchbook, its pages a reclaimed legacy, and Keisha's article, now a global call for justice. #Justice for Denise still trended, Harlem's voice unyielding. Denise Harper stepped from the wings, her presence quiet but powerful. The crowd fell silent, then erupted as she raised a trembling hand. "These boys gave me back my name," she said, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes locking on Malik and Jaden. "This is for every black designer told they weren't enough." She handed them a faded sketch, her final unpublished work, a suit woven with kente and jazz motifs. Malik's voice broke as he took it. "For you, Miss Harper," he said, and Jaden echoed, "For us all." The crowd stood, their cheers shaking the rafters, Harlem's elders leading the chant, "Denise, Harper's echo." Aisha joined them on stage, her arms enveloping her sons. "You're my legacy," she whispered, her voice cracking. Mrs. Ruby climbed the steps, her kente scarf vibrant, her fist raised. "Harlem's proud, Aisha," she said, her voice a battle cry. "You built this." The quartet's horns hit a fevered pitch, and the hall felt like a street festival, drums, laughter, and pride pulsing through. Keisha, in the press pit, filmed every moment, her article's headline already forming, "Harper's Echo, a Black Legacy Reborn." Backstage, Aisha's heart raced as she spotted a familiar figure, Ethan Marshall, lurking in the shadows, his once pristine suit now frayed. His eyes, hollow with defeat, met hers. Vanguard was in ruins, Laura jailed for plagiarism, her emails to investors uncovered by Maya's hacker, sealing her fate. Ethan approached, his voice a rasp. "I read Keisha's article," he said, his hands shaking. "I lost everything, Aisha. I'm sorry. For Malik, Jaden, you." He reached for her, but Aisha stepped back, her gaze steel. "Your sorrow's too late," she said. "You chose shame over love. Live with it." Malik and Jaden flanked her, their pendants glinting. "You're not our father," Malik said, his voice low, final. Jaden's eyes burned, his silence louder than words. Ethan's shoulders slumped, the weight of his choices crushing him. He slipped away, a broken man swallowed by the city's shadows, as Keisha's camera captured his retreat. Aisha's heart steadied. She'd faced his lies, Laura's threats, and won. The crowd's chant grew louder, Harlem's elders, Ruby among them, leading with raised fists. Aisha took the mic, her voice clear, unyielding. "This is for Denise, for Harlem, for every dream stolen," she said. "Harper's Echo is our truth, our strength." She handed the mic to Denise, who smiled through tears. "Keep shining," Denise said, her voice a beacon. The jazz swelled, its notes a victory hymn, as models circled the runway, their kente fabrics blazing. As the show ended, Aisha, Malik, and Jaden stood together, their hands clasped, the crowd's roar a tidal wave. Keisha rushed over, her camera still rolling. "This is history," she said, her eyes alight. "Harlem's telling the world." Ruby joined them, her arms enveloping all three. "You've made us proud, child," she whispered to Aisha, her braids brushing her shoulder. Malik and Jaden hugged Denise, their pendants touching, a shared vow fulfilled. Outside, Ethan stood alone, reading Keisha's final article on his phone, its words a mirror to his ruin. Aisha's family, Harlem's heart, had built an empire of truth. As jazz notes drifted from the hall, Aisha looked at her sons, their future boundless. "We did it," she said, her voice a song of triumph. The city's pulse beat on, and their legacy would echo forever. Aisha, Malik, and Jaden's triumph in Harper's Echo proves that truth and love outshine lies and shame. What did their journey stir in you? Did their fight for justice resonate, or do you have a story of resilience to share? Drop your thoughts in the comments, let us know where and when you're listening, and rate this tale. 1 for unforgettable, 0 if it missed the mark. Your voice fuels our stories. Thank you for joining us in Harlem's Heartbeat, for standing with Aisha's fire. Until next time, keep shining, keep fighting. We'll see you soon. "Help! The kids are falling!" The crowd screams pierce the air as 2 boys plummet toward the raging river, their small hands flailing. Panic grips the onlookers at Riverfront Brew, hearts racing, eyes wide with dread. In that split second, a lone figure dives in, a waitress Talia, risking everything to save them. But what follows isn't gratitude. It's betrayal, accusations, and a storm of prejudice that threatens to drown her courage. This isn't just a rescue. It's a battle for truth, where one woman's bravery exposes lies and reshapes a town. Her fight will leave you stunned, her strength unforgettable. Share where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments, and hit that subscribe button to join us for more stories that ignite hope. Stick around, secrets unravel, and justice rises in ways you won't see coming. "You think you can play hero to scam me, you lowlife?" Robert Carson's voice sliced through the air, venom dripping from every syllable. His face, flushed red, loomed over Talia, a 26-year-old black waitress, as she stood drenched, shivering on the riverbank outside Riverfront Brew. Her uniform clung to her skin, heavy with river water, her chest heaving from the effort of pulling his twin sons, James and Liam, from the churning rapids. The crowd of white patrons, their coffee cups frozen mid-sip, stared in stunned silence. Talia's fists clenched, her nails biting into her palms, as Robert's accusations landed like punches. "I saved your boys," she fired back, her voice raw but steady. Her eyes burned with defiance, though her soaked sneakers squelched against the muddy ground. The river roared behind her, a cruel echo of the chaos she'd just escaped. "Save them," Robert sneered, stepping closer, his polished shoes scuffing the dirt. "You expect me to believe that? You pushed them in, didn't you? Thought you'd stage a little rescue to squeeze money out of me." His words cut deep, laced with the sting of racial contempt. The crowd murmured, some faces hardening with suspicion, others shifting uncomfortably. A woman in a sundress clutched her purse tighter, her lips pursed. Talia's jaw tightened, teeth grinding as she fought the urge to scream. "I saw them slip. I jumped in. That's it." Her words were sharp, each one a shield against his venom. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from the weight of his lies. She'd felt the icy water choke her lungs, the boy's small hand slipping in hers. Yet here she stood, accused of malice. "Don't lie to me," Robert snapped, cutting her off. His hand jabbed the air inches from her face. "People like you always have an angle, always looking for a payout." The phrase "people like you" hung heavy, a coded slur that made Talia's stomach churn. Her eyes flicked to the crowd, searching for a single ally. Most looked away, their silence louder than Robert's rage. "I don't want your money," Talia said, her voice low, trembling with restrained fury. Her hands shook, not from the cold but from the injustice searing through her. She'd risked her life, felt the river's pull threaten to drag her under, all to save two kids who weren't hers. And now this? "You think I'm stupid?" Robert barked, his voice drowning hers. "I know you're kind. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. I'll have you in court for endangering my sons." His finger pointed like a weapon, his eyes narrowing with disgust. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and judgment. A man in a polo shirt whispered to his wife. Maybe she did set it up. Talia's breath hitched, her chest tight as if the river still pressed against it. She wanted to shout, to make them see the truth, but Robert's tirade left no room. His words were a relentless storm, each one stripping away her dignity. She glanced at James and Liam, the twins, huddled nearby, wrapped in towels, their pale faces wide-eyed and trembling. They knew what she'd done. They'd felt her hands pulling them to safety. "You're wrong," she said, her voice cutting through his, her eyes locked onto his, unyielding. "I don't need to scam anyone. I did what was right." Her words carried a quiet power, a spark that made Robert pause for a split second, his brow twitching. But he shook it off, his sneer returning. "We'll see about that," he hissed, turning to the crowd as if rallying an army. "You all saw her! She's no hero!" The accusation echoed, a final blow that left Talia standing alone, the river's cold bite still clinging to her skin. She straightened, her shoulders squaring despite the weight of his words, her eyes catching a glint of sunlight on the water. A flicker of hope amid the storm. Talia's chest burned, her pulse hammering in her ears as Robert Carson's accusations echoed through the crowd. Her soaked uniform stuck to her skin, the river's chill seeping into her bones. But she stood taller, her spine rigid like steel. The crowd's eyes bore into her, some cold with judgment, others flickering with unease. Robert's final jab, "You're no hero," hung in the air, a blade aimed at her heart. Her fists tightened, knuckles whitening, as she swallowed the urge to scream back. She wouldn't crumble. Not here. Not now. "You'll regret this," Robert spat, his voice low and menacing, his finger still pointing like a loaded gun. "I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are." His words dripped with contempt, each one a fresh wound. Talia's lips pressed into a thin line, her jaw clenching so hard her teeth ached. She could feel the crowd's gaze shift, some nodding in agreement with Robert, their whispers cutting deeper than his shouts. A woman in a floral blouse muttered, "She's just a waitress. Why would she risk that?" Talia's eyes flicked to James and Liam, the twins she'd pulled from the river's grasp. Their small faces, pale and shivering, stared back, wide-eyed, lips trembling. She saw the truth in their eyes. They knew she'd saved them. That was enough. She didn't need Robert's approval or the crowd's applause. Her heart steadied, her resolve hardening like iron forged in fire. "I don't regret saving your sons," she said, her voice calm but sharp, slicing through the tension. "I'd do it again. Truth doesn't bend to your lies." Each word was deliberate, a quiet defiance that made Robert's eyes narrow. The crowd hushed, a few heads turning as her words landed. A man in a baseball cap shifted, his brow furrowing, as if her conviction cracked his doubt. Robert scoffed, cutting her off before she could say more. "Save your excuses for court," he snapped, turning to the crowd for support. "She's playing you all." But Talia didn't flinch. Her hands unclenched, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the fire burning inside her. She'd grown up in a world that tried to make her feel small, her mother scrubbing floors, her brother dodging taunts at school. She'd learned early to stand tall, to let hate slide off her like water. "I'm done here," she said, her voice steady, carrying a weight that silenced the murmurs. She turned, her wet sneakers squelching against the gravel, and walked away from Robert's glare. Her steps were slow, deliberate, each one a rejection of his venom. The crowd parted, some avoiding her gaze, others watching with a mix of shame and awe. A young woman clutching a coffee cup whispered to her friend, "She didn't have to save those kids. She's stronger than he thinks." Talia's heart pounded, not from defeat but from a quiet fury. She'd risked her life, felt the river's icy claws, and now bore the sting of Robert's words. Yet she held her head high, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the river met the sky. She wouldn't let his lies define her. As she reached the edge of the cafe's patio, she paused, her breath catching. In the distance, a phone's flash blinked. Someone had recorded the whole thing. Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. The truth was out there, waiting to break free. Robert Carson stormed into his sleek, glass-walled office, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. His face, still flushed from the confrontation at Riverfront Brew, twisted with a mix of fury and unease. Talia's parting words, "Truth doesn't bend to your lies," clawed at his mind, each syllable a splinter he couldn't shake. He slumped into his leather chair, his fingers drumming the desk, his jaw tight. The image of her standing tall, drenched but defiant, haunted him. He'd called her a lowlife, a scammer, but her eyes had burned with a conviction that made his gut twist. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. A notification from an unknown number. He opened it and a video loaded, grainy but unmistakable. Talia, her dark hair plastered to her face, plunged into the churning river, her arms straining as she pulled James and Liam to safety. Their small hands clung to her, their faces pale with fear. The footage cut off just as she dragged them to the bank, her chest heaving, her eyes scanning for danger. Robert's breath caught, his fingers gripping the phone. She hadn't hesitated. She'd risked everything. "Daddy, she saved us," James's voice echoed in his memory, small but certain, from moments after the rescue. Liam had nodded, his eyes wide. "She jumped in so fast." Robert's throat tightened, a bitter taste rising. He'd ignored them, too consumed by his own assumptions to listen. His sons, safe because of her, and he'd spat in her face. His hand raked through his hair, tugging hard, as if pain could drown the shame creeping up his spine. He replayed the video, his eyes narrowing. Something caught his attention. A figure in the background, half hidden by the crowd, standing near the riverbank as Talia fought the current. The figure wore a dark jacket, face obscured, but their stillness was eerie, almost deliberate. Robert froze the frame, his heart pounding. Who was that? Why didn't they help? His phone buzzed again, another message from the same unknown number. A photo this time, a blurry close-up of the same figure, holding something small, maybe a cloth, with a faint embroidered mark. The message read, "You blamed the wrong person?" Robert's pulse raced, his fingers trembling as he zoomed in. The mark on the cloth looked familiar, like something he'd seen in his own office. His mind flashed to Carl, his manager, always lurking, always quick to point fingers. Carl had been at the cafe that day, hadn't he? Robert's stomach churned, doubt gnawing at him. Had he lashed out at Talia to cover his own failure to watch his sons? Or was there something darker at play? He stood pacing, his shoes scuffing the floor. Talia's face flashed in his mind, her steady gaze, her refusal to break. He called her a liar, but this video, these messages, told a different story. His fists clenched, knuckles whitening. He wanted to dismiss it, to cling to his anger, but the truth was clawing its way out. He'd been wrong, dead wrong, and yet pride held him back, a heavy chain around his chest. "Daddy?" James's voice broke through as the twins burst into the room, their school bags slung over their shoulders. "Why did you yell at Talia?" Liam's eyes, usually bright, were clouded with confusion. "She saved us. She's nice." Robert's throat closed, his words stuck. He knelt, pulling them close, their small bodies warm against his. I made a mistake," he muttered, his voice hoarse. The admission burned, but their innocent faces demanded it. As the twins hugged him, Robert's eyes drifted back to the phone, the frozen image of the shadowy figure lingering like a ghost. Someone knew more than they were saying, and he needed to find out who. "You don't get to hide from me!" Robert Carson's voice boomed as he shoved open the door to Riverfront Brew, his eyes blazing with a mix of guilt and desperation. His polished suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, a stark contrast to the confident businessman who'd berated Talia days ago. The video of her saving his twins, James and Liam, looped in his mind, each frame a lash against his pride. Her words, "Truth doesn't bend to your lies," stabbed deeper than he'd admit. He'd been wrong, and the blurry photo of that shadowy figure by the river, the one with the embroidered cloth, gnawed at him. Someone else was there, someone who didn't act. He needed answers, and he needed to face her. The cafe buzzed with lunchtime chatter, but the air shifted as Robert stormed in. Patrons froze mid-bite, their eyes darting to him. A waitress, her apron stained with coffee, flinched at his intensity. "Where's Talia?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the clatter of dishes. The waitress hesitated, her fingers tightening around a tray. "She's not here. Took a few days off after, you know?" Her tone was sharp, her eyes accusing. Robert's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the counter. "Where is she now?" "Not your business," the waitress snapped, turning away. Robert's chest tightened, shame and frustration colliding. He'd humiliated Talia in front of everyone, called her a lowlife, and now her co-workers were closing ranks. He pushed past the counter, ignoring her protest, and scanned the room. A photo on the wall caught his eye. Talia smiling with the staff, her arm around a young boy. Her brother, maybe. His gut twisted. She wasn't just a waitress. She was someone's daughter, someone's sister. He strode out, his shoes pounding the pavement, and headed to the address he'd pried from a reluctant manager. Talia's neighborhood was a world away from his gated estate. Cracked sidewalks, peeling paint, kids playing in the street. His Bentley looked out of place, drawing stares from neighbors. He knocked on a faded blue door, his heart racing. A woman answered, her face lined with exhaustion, her eyes narrowing. "You're the one who called my daughter a liar," she said, her voice cold as steel. Talia's mother. Robert's throat tightened, his usual confidence crumbling. "I need to see her. I was wrong." "She's not here," her mother said, arms crossed. "She's not your punching bag." Robert's fists clenched, not in anger, but in self-loathing. He'd seen the video, heard his son's words, James and Liam, their small voices pleading, "She saved us." He couldn't unsee it. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "I owe her an apology." The woman studied him, her gaze piercing. "You owe her more than that." She pointed down the street. "She's at the community center. Don't expect her to make it easy." Robert drove to the center, a squat building with a faded mural. Inside, he found Talia sorting canned goods for a food drive, her hands moving with purpose. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of his words from that day. He stepped forward, his throat dry. "Talia," he started, but she cut him off, her voice low and sharp. "What do you want, Mr. Carson?" Her fingers tightened around a can, her knuckles paling. I was wrong, he said, forcing the words out. I saw the video. My boys told me. You saved them. His voice cracked, his hands trembling. Talia's eyes locked onto his, unyielding. You think saying sorry fixes it? You called me trash. In front of everyone. Her words were knives, each one precise. Robert flinched, his shoulders sagging. I know. I let my fear, my bias, blind me. Talia set the can down, her movements deliberate. Bias, she said, her voice a whip. You mean you saw my skin and decided I was a criminal? Robert opened his mouth, but no words came. She was right. He judged her before she'd even spoken. The memory of that shadowy figure by the river flashed in his mind, the embroidered cloth haunting him. There's something else, he said, pulling out his phone to show the blurry photo. Someone was there, watching. I need to know who. Talia's eyes narrowed, her fingers brushing the phone screen. Why should I trust you? She asked, her voice steady but guarded. Robert met her gaze, his heart heavy. Because I owe you the truth. Outside, a child's laugh echoed, sharp and fleeting, like a spark in the dark. Keep your apologies, Talia snapped, her voice a blade cutting through Robert Carson's plea. She stood in the community center, surrounded by stacks of canned goods and worn-out chairs, her hands gripping a box of donations. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, locked onto his, daring him to push further. The sting of his accusations, lowlife, scammer, still burned, each word a bruise on her pride. Her fingers tightened, knuckles straining, as she shoved the box onto a shelf. Robert stood frozen, his phone still clutched in his hand, the blurry photo of the shadowy figure by the river glowing faintly on the screen. Talia turned away, her sneakers scuffing the linoleum floor, and moved to a table where kids from the neighborhood sat, their pencils scratching out homework. Focus, Jamal, she said, her tone softening as she leaned over a boy struggling with math. Her hand steadied his shaking pencil, her smile warm but firm. You've got this. The boy nodded, his eyes brightening. Talia's chest swelled, a quiet pride anchoring her. These kids, her brother included, were why she kept going, why she jumped into that river without a second thought. She caught a glimpse of herself in a cracked mirror on the wall, her hair pulled back, her face lined with exhaustion but fierce with resolve. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a sister, a daughter, a fighter. Her mother's long shifts cleaning offices, her brother's dreams of college, they fueled her. Robert's words had tried to strip that away, but she wouldn't let them. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding, as she handed out snacks to the kids, her hands steady despite the storm inside. Hey, Talia, a girl called, her braids swinging as she waved a drawing. This is you saving those boys. The sketch showed a figure diving into waves, two small hands reaching out. Talia's throat tightened, her fingers brushing the paper. That's real nice, Kyla, she said, her voice catching. The kids didn't see her as a victim. To them, she was a hero. Across the room, Jasmine, her best friend and fellow waitress, sorted clothes for the donation drive. You okay? Jasmine asked, her eyes flicking to Robert, who lingered awkwardly near the door. Talia's lips pressed tight, her shoulders squaring. I'm fine, she said, her voice low but fierce. He doesn't get to define me. Jasmine nodded, her hand squeezing Talia's arm. Damn right. You're stronger than his nonsense. Talia moved to the next table, helping a shy girl with her reading. Sound it out, Mia, she urged, her voice gentle but firm. The girl's face lit up as she nailed a word, and Talia's heart lifted, a spark cutting through the weight of Robert's accusations. She didn't need his validation. She was here, making a difference, just as she'd always done. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. You carry us, Talia. Don't ever forget that. As she stacked another box, her eyes caught Robert watching her, his face a mix of shame and awe. She didn't flinch, her gaze steady, challenging. She'd saved his sons, faced his venom, and still stood tall. Her fingers brushed the drawing Kyla gave her, tucked into her pocket, a reminder of who she was. Outside, the hum of the neighborhood buzzed, a faint rhythm of life that pulsed like a heartbeat, calling her forward. You think words erase what you did? Talia's voice slashed through the hum of the community center, her eyes drilling into Robert Carson's. She stood behind a table piled with donation boxes, her hands gripping the edge. knuckles pale with tension. Her heart pounded, the memory of his accusations. Lowlife, scammer, still raw, like a wound that hadn't scabbed over. Robert, his suit rumpled, his face etched with guilt, stepped forward, his hands raised as if to ward off her anger. The kids around them paused, their pencils frozen, sensing the storm brewing. "I'm sorry," Robert said, his voice hoarse, cracking under the weight of his shame. "I saw the video. My boys. They told me you saved them." His eyes dropped, unable to hold her gaze. Talia's jaw tightened, her teeth grinding as she fought the urge to turn away. She'd seen his kind before, men with power who thought apologies fixed everything. Her mother's tired hands, her brother's guarded eyes flashed in her mind. She wasn't here for his pity. "Sorry doesn't undo your words," she fired back, her voice low but sharp, each syllable a jab. "You called me trash in front of everyone. You think I'm here for your money?" Her fingers dug into the table, the wood creaking under her grip. The kids watched, wide-eyed, as Jasmine, nearby, folded her arms, her nod urging Talia on. Robert flinched, his shoulders sagging, but he didn't retreat. "I was wrong," he said, his voice steadier now, forcing the words out. "I let fear, prejudice, blind me. I want to make this right." He pulled out his phone, the blurry photo of the shadowy figure by the river glowing on the screen. "This came to me. Someone was there, watching. I need your help to figure out who." Talia's eyes flicked to the photo, her pulse quickening. The embroidered mark on the cloth sparked a memory, something she'd seen before, maybe at the cafe. "Why me?" she snapped, her voice a challenge. "You didn't trust me before. Why now?" Robert's hands shook, his fingers tightening around the phone. "Because you're the only one who cared enough to act." Her breath hitched, his words landing like a reluctant truth. She straightened, her eyes narrowing. "If you want my trust, you do more than talk," she said, her voice cutting like glass. "You want to make it right? Help the people you've looked down on. This community, my community, needs more than your guilt." Her hand swept toward the kids, their hopeful faces watching. "Start there." Robert nodded, his face pale but resolute. "I'll fund a scholarship for kids like them, like your brother." Talia's lips pressed tight, her heart warring between distrust and a flicker of hope. She didn't forgive him, not yet, but his offer was a start. "Prove it," she said, her voice a whip. "Actions, not promises." As he turned to leave, Talia's hand brushed her pocket, feeling Kyla's drawing from earlier. She paused, her fingers catching on something else. A small, damp piece of cloth tucked inside, unnoticed until now. She pulled it out, her breath catching. It was a handkerchief embroidered with the same mark as the one in Robert's photo. Her eyes widened, her pulse racing. She'd found it near the riverbank after saving the twins, stuffed in her pocket during the chaos. "Who dropped this?" she muttered, her voice barely audible. She glanced at Robert, now at the door, his back to her. Her fingers tightened around the cloth, its weight heavy with secrets. She didn't trust him fully, but this tied them together. Someone had been there, watching her risk everything, and they hadn't moved. Her eyes burned with determination, her grip on the cloth unyielding. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers, reaching for the truth. "You're making a fool of yourself, Carson," Carl's voice hissed, sharp as a snake's bite, as he leaned across Robert's desk, his gray eyes cold and calculating, locked onto his boss, his lips curling into a sneer. The office air felt thick, charged with tension, as Robert sat rigid, his fingers gripping the arms of his chair. Talia's challenge, "Prove it, actions, not promises," still burned in his mind, but Carl's sudden hostility cut deeper. The embroidered handkerchief, its mark matching the one in the blurry photo from that day at the river, sat heavy in Robert's pocket, a nagging clue to a truth he couldn't grasp. "You're throwing money at that waitress's pet project?" Carl spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "She's playing you. She staged that rescue to get into your wallet." His hand slammed the desk, papers scattering. Robert's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening. He'd seen the video, felt his son's trembling hands as they vouched for Talia. Carl's words echoed his own past accusations, but now they rang hollow, laced with something darker. "She saved my boys," Robert said, his voice low, steady but edged with warning. "You were there, Carl. You saw it." His eyes narrowed, searching his manager's face. Carl's sneer faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his features. He straightened, smoothing his tie, but his fingers twitched, betraying a crack in his composure. "Saw what?" Carl shot back, his tone sharp. "A nobody trying to be a hero? You're blind, Robert. She's trouble." His words were a jab, but his eyes darted to the side, avoiding Robert's gaze. Robert's pulse quickened, the memory of the shadowy figure by the river flashing in his mind. Carl had been at the cafe that day, lingering near the edge of the crowd, his dark jacket blending into the chaos. Was it him in the photo? "You didn't help," Robert said, his voice ablade. "My sons were drowning, and you just stood there." His accusation hung heavy, the air between them crackling. Carl's face hardened, his lips pressing into a thin line. "I wasn't close enough," he snapped, but his voice wavered, a lie teetering on the edge. Robert leaned forward, his fist clenching. "What's your angle, Carl?" His eyes flicked to the handkerchief in his pocket, the embroidered mark a silent question. Carl's sneer returned, but it was forced, his hands fidgeting. "You're digging your own grave, trusting her," he said, his voice low, menacing. "This scholarship nonsense? It'll ruin your reputation, and mine." The word mine hit Robert like a spark. Carl's ambition had always simmered, his push for control in their company's big real estate deal, his quiet resentment of Robert's success. Was the river incident a setup? Robert's stomach churned, his fingers brushing the handkerchief. "Get out," he said, his voice cold, final. Carl smirked, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear as he turned and strode out, his footsteps sharp against the floor. Robert sank back, his heart pounding. Carl's words, his evasion, felt like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't yet solve. He pulled out the handkerchief, its mark staring back at him, a silent accusation. Outside, the office window framed a darkening sky, the first drops of rain streaking down, mirroring the storm brewing within him. "Carl's hiding something," Talia hissed, her voice low, her eyes blazing as she shoved the embroidered handkerchief across the table. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from a fire igniting within her. She sat in a cramped diner booth, the vinyl seat creaking under her weight, facing Jasmine and Marcus, a local journalist with a knack for digging up dirt. The handkerchief, its strange mark matching the one in Robert's blurry photo, lay between them like a loaded gun. Carl's sneer from the cafe, his venomous words, "She's trouble," echoed in her mind, fueling her resolve. She'd saved 2 boys, taken Robert's insults, and now this cloth tied her to a truth she couldn't ignore. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, her hands clenching her coffee mug. "He was there, Talia. I saw him by the river, just standing there." Her voice was sharp, her lips tight. "Didn't lift a finger while you were fighting the current." Talia's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding. Carl's inaction wasn't just cowardice, it felt deliberate, like a piece of a larger puzzle. Her heart pounded, the memory of the river's icy grip mixing with the sting of his accusations. Marcus leaned forward, his pen tapping the table, his brow furrowed. "This mark," he said, tracing the embroidery with a finger. "I've seen it before, on a jacket in the cafe's Lost and Found." His voice was low, urgent, his eyes flicking to Talia. "Carl's jacket." Talia's pulse spiked, her fist tightening. "You sure?" she asked, her voice ablade. Marcus nodded, pulling out his phone to show a photo he'd snapped weeks ago. A dark jacket with the same embroidered mark, left behind after a staff meeting. "We need more," Talia said, her voice steady but fierce. She wasn't just fighting for herself now. The kids at the community center, her brother's dreams, her mother's sacrifices, they all pushed her forward. She stood, her sneakers scuffing the diner floor, and grabbed the handkerchief. "Let's start at the cafe." They slipped into Riverfront Brew after closing, the dim light casting shadows across empty tables. Talia's hands moved fast, rifling through the lost and found bin behind the counter. Her fingers brushed worn scarves, forgotten hats, until they closed around a heavy jacket. She pulled it out, her breath catching. The embroidered mark stared back at her, identical to the handkerchiefs. "Carl's," she muttered, her heart racing. Jasmine's eyes widened, her hand gripping Talia's arm. He was there, Talia, watching. Marcus crouched by the manager's office, jimmied the lock with a credit card. "Got something," he whispered, pulling out a stack of papers. Talia and Jasmine crowded around as he flipped through them. An email printout caught their eye. It was from Carl to a rival developer, dated the day before the river incident. "Carson's distracted. Push the deal now," it read. Talia's stomach churned, her fingers tightening on the jacket. "He wanted Robert out of the picture," she said, her voice low, furious. The boys were just collateral. Jasmine's face hardened, her fists clenching. "He let them drown to screw Robert over?" Her voice was a whip, her eyes blazing. Talia nodded, her jaw tight. "He didn't count on me." Her words were steel, her resolve unyielding. She jumped into that river without hesitation, and now she'd dive into this fight with the same fire. Marcus kept digging, pulling up an old security log from the cafe system. "Look at this," he said, his finger jabbing at the screen. Carl had clocked out early that day, but his keycard swiped near the riverbank entrance minutes before the twins fell. Talia's pulse thundered, her hands shaking as she clutched the handkerchief. "He was right there," she said, her voice barely a whisper, rage simmering beneath. They stepped outside, the night air sharp against their skin. Talia's eyes scanned the riverbank, the same spot where she'd saved James and Liam. Her fingers traced the embroidery, her mind racing. "We need to find who sent Robert that photo," she said, her voice firm. Marcus nodded, his phone already out, texting a contact. "I know a guy who can trace the number, but it'll take time." Jasmine grabbed Talia's shoulder, her grip fierce. "You're not doing this alone," she said, her eyes locked on Talia's. "We're with you." Talia's chest tightened, a surge of gratitude cutting through her anger. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a fighter, backed by people who believed in her. Her fingers closed around the handkerchief, its weight a promise of justice. As they walked away, Talia glanced back at the river, its surface glinting under the streetlights. Something caught her eye, a scrap of paper tucked under a rock, half buried in the mud. She knelt, her heart pounding, and pulled it free. It was a torn note, the handwriting jagged, with one word scrawled in ink. Betrayal. The river's current roared, a warning of secrets yet to surface. "Carl set them up." Talia's voice cracked like a whip, her hands shaking as she clutched the torn note. The word betrayal scrawled in jagged ink. She stood in Marcus's cluttered apartment, the dim light casting shadows across stacks of papers and a flickering laptop screen. Jasmine paced behind her, fists clenched, her breath sharp with fury. The embroidered handkerchief, Carl's jacket, the email to a rival developer, and the security log all pointed to a chilling truth. Talia's heart pounded, her jaw tight as the pieces snapped into place. She'd saved James and Liam, but Carl had wanted them to fall. Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard, his eyes narrowed. "Got it," he said, his voice low, urgent. He spun the laptop, revealing a grainy audio file sent by his contact, a former employee of Carl's. Talia hit play, her pulse thundering. Carl's voice, cold and calculated, filled the room. "Let Carson's kids wander. A scare will shake him. We'll close the deal before he recovers." The words hit like a punch, Talia's knuckles whitening as she gripped the table. "He used them," she hissed, her voice raw, her eyes blazing. "He let those boys drown for a damn deal." Her chest heaved, the memory of the river's icy pull flooding back, her arms straining, the twins' terrified gasps. She'd risked everything, and Carl had stood by, plotting. Jasmine slammed her hand on the table, her face twisted with rage. "He's a monster," she spat. "We nail him." Marcus leaned back, his fingers drumming the table. "This audio's gold, but there's more. The note, it's from Sarah, Carl's old assistant. She sent Robert that photo." He pulled up an email from Sarah, her words rushed, fearful. "Carl planned it. He wanted Robert distracted. I saw him drop the ball near the river." Talia's breath caught, her fingers tracing the note's jagged edges. Sarah had been there, watching, too scared to act until now. The embroidered handkerchief was Carl's, dropped in his haste to flee the scene. Talia's blood boiled, her nails biting into her palms. Carl hadn't just failed to help, he'd orchestrated the danger, banking on tragedy to ruin Robert and secure his own power. Her eyes flicked to Jasmine, then Marcus, their faces set with determination. "He doesn't get away with this," she said, her voice steel, her resolve unyielding. She'd faced Robert's venom, carried her community's hopes, and now she held the truth in her hands. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "We take this to Robert tomorrow." Talia's fingers closed around the note, its weight a promise of justice. She'd jumped into that river for two boys she didn't know, and now she'd dive into this fight for them, for herself, for everyone Carl had tried to bury. As she stepped toward the door, her sneakers firm against the floor, a faint buzz came from her phone. A new message from an unknown number. "Meet me. I know more." Her heart skipped, her eyes narrowing at the glowing screen. "You've got nothing on me," Carl's voice roared, his eyes wild as he loomed over Talia in the dim basement office of Carson Enterprises. His hands slammed the desk, the impact rattling a stack of files. Talia stood firm, her heart pounding, her fingers clutching the torn note with betrayal scrawled in jagged ink. The audio file, Carl's cold voice plotting to use the twins near drowning for his own gain, burned in her mind. She'd come to confront him, armed with Sarah's email and the embroidered handkerchief, but Carl's fury was a storm she hadn't anticipated. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding, as she faced the man who'd let James and Liam slip into danger. "You set them up," Talia said, her voice sharp, cutting through his rage. "You dropped that ball by the river. You wanted Robert distracted." Her eyes locked onto his, unyielding, her fingers tightening around the note. Carl's face twisted, a sneer curling his lips. "You're out of your league, waitress," he spat, stepping closer, his breath hot with menace. "Keep poking, and you'll regret it." Talia's pulse raced, her fist balling at her sides. She'd saved those boys, taken Robert's insults, and now stood inches from a man who'd gambled with their lives. "I've got proof," she said, her voice steady, a blade. "Your voice on tape. Your deal with the rival. Sarah saw you." Her words hit like punches and Carl's eyes flickered, a crack in his armor. "Lie!" he barked, cutting her off. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist, twisting hard. Pain flared, but Talia didn't flinch, her other hand shoving the handkerchief in his face. "This is yours," she hissed, her voice a whip. "You dropped it when you ran." Carl's grip tightened, his face paling, but his sneer held. "You think anyone will believe you over me?" he growled, yanking her closer. "You're nobody." Her heart thundered, but her eyes burned with defiance. "I'm enough to stop you," she said, wrenching her wrist free, her nails scraping his skin. She stepped back, her sneakers scraping the concrete floor, but Carl lunged, shoving her against a filing cabinet. The metal clanged, her shoulder throbbing from the impact. "You don't walk away from this," he snarled, his hand reaching for the note in her grip. Talia's breath hitched, her mind racing. She'd faced the river's pull, Robert's venom. She wouldn't break now. "Back off!" she shouted, her voice echoing in the cramped space. Her knee jerked up, catching Carl's thigh, forcing him to stumble. She darted for the door, but he grabbed a heavy ledger from the desk, hurling it at her. It grazed her arm, pain shooting through her, but she kept moving, her fingers still clutching the note. The door was locked, Carl's doing. Her chest tightened, her eyes scanning for an escape. "You're done," Carl said, his voice low, predatory, as he advanced. Talia's hand found a metal pipe leaning against the wall, her grip tightening. "Not yet," she snapped, raising the pipe, her eyes fierce. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Jasmine, probably, after Talia's hurried text for backup. She just needed to hold out. Carl hesitated, his eyes flicking to the pipe, his sneer wavering. Talia's heart pounded, her resolve steel. She jumped into a river for two kids she didn't know, faced a crowd's judgment, and now stared down a man who'd tried to ruin them all. Her fingers tightened on the pipe, her stance unwavering. Outside, footsteps echoed faintly, growing louder, a promise of rescue cutting through the dark. "Open the door, Carl!" Jasmine's voice thundered through the basement office door, her fist pounding the metal, each bang a jolt to Talia's racing heart. She gripped the metal pipe, her knuckles white, her shoulder throbbing from the filing cabinet's impact. Carl's eyes, wild with panic, darted between her and the door, his sneer crumbling. The torn note, betrayal, was still clutched in her hand, its jagged ink a testament to his scheme. She'd faced the river's pull, Robert's venom, and now Carl's trap, but her resolve burned hotter than ever. Her sneakers scraped the concrete, her stance firm as she held the pipe high. "Back off!" Talia snapped, her voice a blade, cutting through Carl's predatory advance. Her phone buzzed again, Marcus probably, rushing to join Jasmine after her desperate text. Carl lunged for the note, his fingers grazing her wrist, but she swung the pipe, forcing him to stumble back. The door rattled, Jasmine's shouts growing louder. "Talia, hold on!" With a grunt, Talia shoved a chair against the door, buying time. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on Carl's desk, cluttered with files and a laptop left open. Her pulse spiked. She needed evidence, something undeniable. She darted to the desk, her hands trembling but swift, yanking open drawers. Carl's face twisted, his voice a growl. "You're dead if you touch that." "Try me," Talia shot back, her voice steel, her fingers ripping through papers. Her heart pounded, the memory of Carl's audio. "Let Carson's kids wander," fueling her fury. She'd saved James and Liam, taken Robert's insults, and now she was inches from the truth. Her hand closed around a USB drive, tucked in a drawer, its label scrawled with "Deal Docs." She shoved it into her pocket, her eyes flicking to Carl. He charged, his shoulder slamming into her, knocking her against the wall. Pain flared, but her grip on the note tightened, her resolve unyielding. The door burst open, Jasmine and Marcus storming in. Jasmine grabbed Carl's arm, twisting it hard, her face fierce. "Get off her!" she roared, shoving him back. Marcus, his camera phone already recording, caught Carl's panicked expression. "Got you," Marcus said, his voice low, sharp. Talia scrambled to her feet, her breath ragged, her fingers still clutching the USB. "Check his laptop," she said, her voice urgent, pointing to the glowing screen. Marcus dove in, his fingers flying across the keys. "Passwords cracked," he said, his eyes narrowing as files loaded. An email chain appeared, Carl's name glaring in the sender line, addressed to a rival developer. "Carson's out of the game after the river incident. Push the contract now," one read. Another, dated the day of the incident, detailed Carl's plan. "Kids near the water. Easy distraction." Talia's stomach churned, her fists clenching. "He planned it all," she said, her voice low, furious. "He used those boys." Jasmine's eyes blazed, her hand still gripping Carl's arm. "You're scum," she spat, her voice a whip. Carl yanked free, his face pale, his hands shaking. "You can't prove anything," he stammered, but his voice cracked, his confidence shattered. Marcus held up the USB, his lips curling. "This says otherwise." Talia's chest heaved, her eyes burning with determination. She jumped into a river for 2 kids, faced a crowd's judgment, and now held the key to Carl's downfall. "We take this to Robert," she said, her voice steady, commanding. "Tomorrow at the community event." Her fingers tightened around the USB, its weight a promise of justice. Marcus nodded, slipping the drive into his pocket. "We'll need backup. This'll blow up." Jasmine grabbed Talia's hand, her grip fierce. "You're unstoppable," she said, her eyes shining with pride. Talia's lips twitched, not quite a smile, her heart still racing. She'd fought her way out of Carl's trap, just as she'd fought the river's pull. Her shoulder ached, her wrist bruised, but her spirit was iron. As they left the basement, Carl's defeated slump burned into her memory. Outside, the night air hit her face sharp and cold. Talia glanced at the USB in Marcus's hand, then at the note in her own. Its single word, betrayal, a spark ready to ignite. Across the street, a crowd gathered for the community event, their voices a faint hum, waiting for the truth to break free. "You're done, Carl!" Talia's voice rang out, sharp as a blade, cutting through the hum of the community center's packed auditorium. Her hands gripped the podium, knuckles pale, the USB drive and torn note, betrayal, burning in her pocket. The crowd, a mix of locals, Robert Carson, and his twins, James and Liam, stared up at her, their faces a sea of anticipation. Her heart pounded, her shoulders still throbbing from Carl's attack in the basement, but her eyes blazed with fire. She'd saved two boys, faced a river's wrath, and now she'd tear down a liar. Carl stood near the stage, his face pale, his sneer faltering as Talia raised the USB. "This," she said, her voice steady, "proves you set up the twins' accident." The crowd gasped, heads turning. Robert's eyes widened, his fists clenching. Talia nodded to Marcus, who plugged the drive into a laptop, projecting Carl's email onto a screen. "Carson's out of the game after the river incident. Push the contract now," it read. Murmurs erupted, sharp and angry. "You let those boys drown for a deal," Talia snapped, her voice a whip, pointing at Carl. Her chest heaved, the memory of the river's icy grip fueling her rage. "You dropped the ball, watched them fall, and blamed me." Her words sliced through the air, each one a blow. Carl's hands shook, his eyes darting to the exits. "Lies!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "She's a nobody." Jasmine stepped forward, her face fierce, holding up her phone. "Not anymore," she said, hitting play. Carl's voice filled the room, cold and calculated. "Let Carson's kids wander. A scare will shake him." The crowd roared, some standing, their shouts drowning Carl's protests. James and Liam, seated beside Robert, clutched their father's hands, their faces pale but resolute. "She saved us," James said, his small voice cutting through the chaos. Liam nodded. "You didn't." Robert stood, his jaw tight, his eyes burning into Carl. "You used my sons," he growled, his voice low, lethal. "You're finished." The crowd's anger swelled, a woman in the back yelling, "Get him out!" Talia's fingers tightened on the podium, her breath steady despite the storm inside. She'd faced Carl's threats, Robert's insults, and now stood tall, the truth her weapon. Carl stumbled back, his face ashen, his hands raised as if to ward off the crowd's fury. "You can't prove it," he stammered. But Marcus held up the handkerchief, its embroidered mark glaring under the lights. "This is yours," he said, his voice sharp. "Found by the river. Sarah saw you drop it." The crowd's shouts grew louder, a tidal wave of outrage. Carl turned, bolting for the door, but security blocked his path, their hands firm. Talia's eyes met Robert's, a silent understanding passing between them. She'd fought for this moment, for justice, for the boys she'd pulled from the river. Her heart swelled, not with pride but with purpose. As Carl was led away, the crowd's applause thundered, a few hands reaching out to touch her shoulder. She stood firm, her gaze fixed on the screen, the email still glowing. Outside, the river's current roared, a faint echo of victory calling for justice to be sealed. "You're fired, Carl!" Robert Carson's voice sliced through the boardroom, his eyes blazing as he slammed a termination letter onto the table. Carl, pale and sweating, stood frozen, his hands trembling as security flanked him. The USB drive's evidence, emails, audio, the embroidered handkerchief, had been handed to the police, and now Carl faced charges for reckless endangerment. Talia stood at the room's edge, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. Her heart pounded, not with triumph but with relief. She'd fought the river, faced Carl's threats, and now watched him fall. "You can't do this," Carl sputtered, his voice cracking, his sneer gone. "I made this company." Robert leaned forward, his fists clenched. "You used my sons," he growled, his voice low, lethal. "You're done." The board members, their faces grim, nodded in agreement. Carl's scheme to sabotage Robert's focus with the twins near drowning for a rival deal was laid bare. The police report confirmed it. Sarah's testimony, the emails, the security log, all airtight. Talia's fingers brushed the torn note in her pocket. Betrayal. Its weight lighter now. She'd exposed Carl not just for herself, but for James and Liam, for her community. Her chest tightened, her eyes flicking to Robert. He met her gaze, his nod brief but heavy with respect. "It's over," he said, his voice softer now. Talia's lips pressed tight, her heart steady. "It better be," she replied, her voice sharp, unyielding. As security led Carl out, his shoulders slumped, his footsteps dragging. The boardroom doors closed with a thud, sealing his fate. Talia's hands unclenched, her breath steadying. She'd carried the truth through a storm of lies, and now it stood tall. Her mother's words echoed, "You carry us, Talia." She had, and she would keep carrying. Outside, the community center's lights glowed, a beacon for the work ahead. Talia stepped toward the door, her sneakers firm, ready to build something new from the ashes of betrayal. "This is for you, Talia," Robert Carson's voice boomed, his hands gripping a microphone as he stood before a packed crowd at the newly renovated community center. His eyes, once clouded with prejudice, now shone with purpose. His suit crisp, but his posture humbled. Talia stood beside him, her arms crossed, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and caution. The memory of his accusations, lowlife, scammer, still stung, but Carl's downfall, sealed by the police and the boardroom's verdict, had shifted something in Robert. Her fingers brushed the torn note in her pocket. Betrayal, a reminder of the fight she'd won. Now she faced a new challenge, trusting his redemption. Robert raised a plaque, the words Talia Williams Scholarship Fund gleaming under the lights. "This fund," he said, his voice steady, "will support kids from every corner of this town, starting with those who've been overlooked." The crowd roared, their applause thundering. Talia's jaw tightened, her eyes scanning the faces. Kids like her brother, mothers like hers, all watching with hope. Her chest swelled, not with forgiveness, but with possibility. She jumped into a river, faced a liar's threats, and now stood as a beacon for change. "You're not just funding this," Talia said, stepping to the mic, her voice sharp, commanding. "You're building it with us." Her words cut through the cheers, her gaze locking onto Robert's. "This isn't charity, it's justice." Her hands clenched, knuckles paling, as she spoke. "Kids like these, they deserve a shot, not a handout." The crowd hushed, her conviction silencing them. A woman in the front, her eyes glistening, nodded fiercely. Robert stepped back, his nod brief but heavy. "You're right," he said, his voice low, raw. "I'm learning. From you." He gestured to a table where blueprints lay spread out, a plan to rebuild the community center into a hub for free education, mentorship, and job training, focused on Black and underserved youth. Talia's heart raced, her fingers twitching with purpose. She'd demanded action, and Robert was delivering. Millions pledged, his company's resources poured into the project. Jasmine, standing nearby, grabbed Talia's hand, her grip fierce. "You did this!" she whispered, her eyes blazing with pride. Talia's lips pressed tight, her throat tight. She thought of her mother, scrubbing floors late into the night, her brother studying under a flickering lamp. This was for them, for every kid who'd been told they were less. Talia took the mic again, her voice steady but fierce. "This center," she said, her hands sweeping toward the crowd, "is ours. We build it together. For our kids, our future." Her words landed like sparks, igniting cheers. A young girl clutching a notebook waved at Talia, her smile wide. Talia's chest tightened, a surge of protectiveness washing over her. She'd faced a river, a liar, a crowd's judgment. She'd face this too. Robert joined her, his hand extended. "Co-director," he said, his voice firm. "Run it with me." Talia hesitated, her eyes searching his. She saw sincerity, but her guard stayed up. "I'll run it," she said, her voice ablade. "But it's for them, not you." She shook his hand, her grip iron, sealing the deal. The crowd erupted, their applause a tidal wave. As Robert stepped aside, Talia's eyes caught her brother in the crowd, his face lit with pride. Her mother stood beside him, her hands clasped, her smile fierce. Talia's heart swelled, her resolve unyielding. She'd turned pain into power, lies into truth. Her fingers brushed the plaque, its cool surface grounding her. Outside, the community center's new sign glowed, its light cutting through the dusk, a promise of hope built on the ruins of betrayal. "We're building a future, not just a center." Talia's voice soared, sharp and unwavering, as she stood at the podium of the newly opened Talia Williams Community Center. Her hands gripped the microphone, knuckles steady, her eyes blazing with purpose. The crowd, hundreds of faces, from her mother's tear-streaked smile to her brother's proud grin, cheered, their applause a thunderous wave. She'd fought a river's pull, faced Carl's threats, endured Robert's venom, and now stood tall, a beacon for her town. Her heart pounded, not with fear but with a fire that refused to dim. The plaque behind her, etched with her name, gleamed under the lights, a testament to her journey. Her gaze swept the room, landing on James and Liam, the twins she'd saved, sitting beside Robert Carson. Their small hands waved, their faces bright with gratitude. Robert stood, his suit crisp but his posture humbled, his eyes meeting hers with respect. "Talia," he said, stepping to the mic, his voice raw, "you showed me what courage looks like." He paused, his throat tight. "This center, this fund, it's your legacy." The crowd roared, their cheers shaking the walls. Talia's jaw clenched, her chest swelling with a mix of pride and caution. She demanded action, and he delivered. Millions for scholarships, a rebuilt center for kids like her brother, for families like hers. "I didn't do this alone," Talia said, her voice cutting through the noise, steady as steel. "This is for us, all of us." Her hand swept toward the crowd, toward Jasmine, who stood with arms crossed, her smile fierce, toward Marcus, his camera flashing, capturing the moment, toward the kids from the neighborhood, their eyes wide with dreams. Her mother, hands clasped, nodded, her face glowing with quiet strength. Talia's brother, now a scholarship recipient, clutched a college acceptance letter, his grin unstoppable. Her heart tightened, her fingers brushing the torn note in her pocket. Betrayal. Now a relic of a fight she'd won. She stepped forward, her sneakers firm on the stage. "I jumped into that river for two boys I didn't know," she said, her voice a blade slicing through the air. "I faced lies, hate, and danger. But I stood up, and so can you." Her words landed like sparks, igniting the crowd. A young girl clutching a notebook shouted, "You're my hero, Talia." The room erupted, hands clapping, voices rising. Talia's throat caught, her eyes stinging, but she held her head high, her resolve iron. Robert joined her, his hand extended. "You've changed this town," he said, his voice low, earnest. "You've changed me." Talia shook his hand, her grip strong, her eyes searching his. She saw no trace of the man who'd called her lowlife. "Keep changing," she said, her voice sharp but hopeful. "For them." She nodded toward the kids, toward James and Liam, who ran up, their arms wrapping around her. "You saved us," Liam said, his voice small but clear. James nodded. "You're the best." Talia knelt, pulling them close, her heart swelling with a protectiveness that felt like family. Jasmine stepped up, her hand squeezing Talia's shoulder. "You built this," she said, her voice fierce with pride. Marcus, still snapping photos, grinned. "The world's gonna know your name," he said, his eyes bright. Talia's lips twitched, not quite a smile, her chest tight with gratitude. Her mother approached, her hands cupping Talia's face. "You carried us," she whispered, her voice breaking. Talia hugged her, her breath hitching, the weight of years, her mother's late-night shifts, her brother's struggles, lifting in that embrace. The crowd began to disperse, but Talia lingered, her eyes scanning the room. The center buzzed with life, kids laughing, mentors planning, hope alive in every corner. Her brother, now dreaming of engineering, chatted with a teacher. Her mother, honored with a volunteer role, organized supplies. The twins, safe and smiling, clung to Robert, who nodded at Talia, a silent vow to keep learning. This was her family new, not bound by blood but by courage, truth, and shared purpose. Talia stepped outside, the river's hum a familiar pulse. She stood where she'd saved the twins, her hands steady, her heart full. "Courage isn't just one act," she said, her voice soft but firm, speaking to the night. "It's every day, every fight, every truth." Her words carried a lesson. Courage and kindness can shatter prejudice, and unity can rebuild a broken world. Her fingers brushed the plaque's name, her name, etched for generations to come. As she walked back inside, the center's lights glowed, voices rising in laughter and plans. Talia's steps were sure, her spirit unbreakable. She'd faced a river, a liar, a town's doubt, and emerged stronger. Her legacy wasn't just a building, it was hope, carved from struggle, shining for all who dared to stand. The river flowed on, its current a song of resilience, carrying her story far beyond the bank. This story of Talia teaches us that courage and kindness can shatter prejudice, proving that truth and unity can transform lives and communities. No matter the odds, standing up for what's right sparks change that ripples far beyond a single act. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you faced a moment where courage made a difference? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's inspire each other. Thank you for watching, for believing in hope, and for being part of this journey. See you in the next video. Your Black women's charity dreams belong here, Zola? Julian Croft's venomous jab ignites Blackwood's Grand Hall, slashing at Zola Vance, a Black woman radiant in a royal blue gown that flares like wildfire. The chandelier's glow wavers. Elites in tuxedos and shimmering dresses freeze, some sneering, others uneasy, craving her collapse. Zola's eyes, twin flames of defiance, scorch Julian, her silence a roaring blaze that rattles the room. He, arm entwined with Blair's cold grace, laughs, certain he's broken her. But the oak doors at the hall's end thunder open, admitting Kaelen Shaw, Zola's billionaire husband. What power will he wield to crush Julian's scorn? Will Zola's fire burn away their past? How will this night redefine their world? One ember sparks, ready to unleash an inferno. She's fooling the world with her Black empowerment nonsense, Julian Croft's voice snarled through the sleek Manhattan penthouse, his fingers crumpling a Forbes magazine as he glared at Blair, her icy blonde hair catching the city's neon glow. The cover blazed with Zola Vance's face, her eyes fierce under the headline, Redefining Leadership, Innovate Forward's Global Impact. Julian tossed the magazine onto a glass table, its thud echoing like a challenge. She's playing the charity card, Blair, but I'll burn her down at Blackwood. Across the country, in a San Francisco office pulsing with ambition, Zola Vance leaned over a desk cluttered with reports and coffee mugs, her team's cheers still ringing from a $500 million deal with an international foundation. Innovate Forward, her nonprofit, had just secured funding to train another 1 million women of color for global leadership roles. Screens around her flared with metrics. 1.5 million women empowered, $3 billion in education investments. Her royal blue blazer, tailored sharply, mirrored the gown she'd wear to Blackwood, a silent vow to stand unbowed. Yet as her assistant slid a cream-colored envelope across the desk, Blackwood Academy's gold-embossed seal glinting like a taunt, her breath caught. The past flickered, unbidden. Years ago, Julian's voice had cut deeper than any blade. Education for women? Wall Street doesn't care about your dreams, Zola, he'd sneered in their shared apartment, his cufflinks glinting as he adjusted his tie. Blair gets it. Power is money, not ideals. Zola had been a double major at Blackwood, sociology and global studies. Her passion for equity was dismissed as cute by Julian's Wall Street crowd. His indifference had eroded her. Each critique, her bold ideas, her natural curls, her unapologetic blackness, stoking a quiet fire she hadn't yet learned to wield. Their divorce was civil, a cold agreement, but his final words lingered. You'll fade, Zola. You're not built for the real world. Now that world was hers. Innovate Forward wasn't just a nonprofit, it was a revolution. Its programs reshaping boardrooms from Nairobi to New York. Yet the envelope burned in her hands, its weight heavier than paper. Blackwood was Julian's kingdom, a place where her voice had once been drowned by whispers of too much or not enough. Her fingers traced the seal, memories of classrooms where professors praised her intellect but mispronounced her name, of galas where Julian's friends offered backhanded compliments. You're so articulate for someone from your background. The fire in her chest flared, not with rage but with resolve. She didn't need to go. Her life was full, board meetings, speeches, and women whose lives she'd changed. But the invitation wasn't just a call to a reunion. It was a gauntlet, a dare to face the world that had tried to dim her light. Zola's phone buzzed, Kaelen Shaw's face lighting up the screen. Her husband, a billionaire investor whose quiet power moved markets, was her anchor. You've seen the Forbes piece? His voice rumbled through the video call. warm but edged with pride. You're not just right, Zola. You're rewriting the rules. Kaelen wasn't like Julian. Where Julian craved the spotlight, Kaelen wielded influence like a shadow, his wealth a tool, not a trophy. He'd funded Innovate Forward's early days, not out of pity, but belief, sitting in on her strategy sessions, listening to her vision of equity with a stillness that made her feel seen. Blackwood's not ready for you, he said now, his dark eyes steady. But go. Show them the future you're building. Zola's lips curved, a spark igniting. She didn't want revenge. Revenge was too small. She wanted reclamation, to walk into Blackwood not as Julian's ex-wife, but as Zola Vance, the woman whose work commanded billions and changed lives. The envelope felt lighter now, not a burden, but a fuse. She'd attend, not to prove herself to Julian, but to claim the space she'd earned. Across Manhattan, Julian's smirk faded as Blair sipped her wine, her eyes narrowing. She'll show up, Julian, Blair said, her voice smooth but sharp. And she'll act like she's above us. Julian's jaw tightened. Zola's Forbes cover had shaken him, its glow exposing cracks in his carefully curated empire. He'd built his life on deals and dominance. But her success, her audacity to thrive without him, gnawed at him. She's nothing, he muttered, but his fingers betrayed him, clenching the magazine's edge. I'll make sure everyone at Blackwood knows it. Zola stood, her office's skyline view framing her like a portrait of power. She slid the invitation into her bag, her mind already racing to the gown she'd wear. A Ghanaian designer's creation, bold and unapologetic. She wasn't returning to Blackwood to beg for a seat at their table. She was coming to build her own, one that would eclipse theirs. The fire Julian had tried to snuff out years ago was now ablaze, and she'd let it burn bright enough to blind them all. I'm not going to Blackwood to grovel, Kaelen. I'm going to torch their stage. Zola Vance's voice crackled with defiance as she faced Kaelen Shaw across her San Francisco office, the city's skyline a mosaic of steel and ambition behind her. Her royal blue blazer, sharp as a blade, framed her like a warrior queen, her sleek black hair a banner of unapologetic strength. Kaelen, his dark eyes glinting with quiet pride, leaned against her desk, his tailored suit a study in understated power. Then let's make sure they feel the heat, he said, his low rumble a spark to her fire. The cream-colored Blackwood invitation lay between them, no longer a taunt, but a fuse, ready to ignite. Zola had decided she wouldn't walk into Blackwood's gilded hall to beg for acceptance from Julian Croft's elitist crowd or prove her worth to the man who'd once dismissed her dreams as cute. She was going to reclaim her space, to stand as the architect of a global movement. Innovate Forward wasn't just her nonprofit. It was a revolution, empowering women of color to lead in boardrooms and parliaments, its impact measured in lives transformed and billions invested. But Blackwood was a battlefield, a place where her passion for equity had been mocked as too idealistic by professors and peers alike. Julian's voice echoed from years past, his words a cold wind. You're wasting your brilliance on lost causes, Zola. She'd let him dim her then, softening her edges to fit his world. Never again. Kaelen's hand grazed hers, grounding her. You've already outgrown them, he said, his voice steady but fierce. But they don't know it yet. Together they'd crafted a plan, not just to attend, but to dominate. $100 million donation to Blackwood's leadership program, tied to strict conditions, curricula focused on diversity, equity, and global impact, modeled on Innovate Forward's framework. It wasn't charity, it was a takeover, a way to etch Zola's vision into the institution that once tried to erase her. An email from a nervous board member had arrived that morning. Ms. Vance, your guidance is reshaping our program. Kaelen smirked, reading it over her shoulder. They're sweating already. Zola's mind turned to her armor for the night, a gown by a Ghanaian designer, its royal blue fabric woven with threads of gold, a nod to her heritage and a declaration of her power. She'd wear it not to dazzle, but to command, her sleek hair a crown she'd refused to tame. Years ago, Julian had winced at her natural curls, murmuring, "They're a bit much for the gala, don't you think?" She'd straightened them then, each pass of the iron a surrender. Now every choice, her hair, her gown, her presence, was a rebellion, a flame kindled by the woman she'd become. Across the country, in Manhattan's glittering cage, Julian paced his penthouse, Blair lounging on a velvet sofa, her wine glass catching the city's pulse. "She'll come, Julian," Blair said, her voice a blade cloaked in silk. "And she'll try to steal your spotlight." Julian's jaw clenched, the Forbes cover still burning in his mind. Zola's success wasn't just a surprise, it was an affront, a crack in the empire he'd built on deals and charm. He'd spent years at Blackwood basking in its approval, his mergers celebrated as triumphs while Zola's ideas were dismissed as noble but naive. Now her name was on every philanthropist's lips, her nonprofit a global force. "She's a fraud," he spat, but his eyes betrayed doubt, flicking to the invitation on his desk. "I'll make sure Blackwood sees through her." Blair's smile was calculated. "Then make it public," she purred, leaning closer. "Show them she's still the dreamer who doesn't belong." Her words stoked Julian's resolve, his need to reassert dominance over the woman who dared to outshine him. He'd humiliate her, not with shouts, but with the sharp, polished cruelty he'd mastered. Blackwood was his stage, and Zola would be his foil, until she wasn't. Zola stood, her office a crucible of purpose. She opened a sketch of her gown on her tablet, its gold threads glinting like embers. "This isn't about Julian," she told Kaelen, her voice steady but fierce. "It's about every woman I've lifted, every door I've opened." Kaelen nodded, his silence a vow. He'd be there, not as her savior, but as her equal, his wealth and influence amplifying her fire. The donation was their weapon, a way to rewrite Blackwood's legacy. "They'll try to smile and clap," he said, a grin tugging at his lips, "but they'll choke on it when they see what you've built." As Zola packed the invitation, her fingers steady, she felt the weight of her past lift. Blackwood wasn't her prison anymore. It was her arena. She wasn't returning to answer Julian's taunts or Blair's sneers. She was coming to burn down their illusions, to show a world that had underestimated her what power truly looked like. The fire she'd once buried was now ablaze, and Blackwood would feel its heat. She strides in like she owns Blackwood's soul. Blair's whisper, sharp as a shard of ice, cut through the hum of Blackwood's grand hall, her words dripping with venom as she leaned into Julian Croft. Zola Vance stepped through the arched doors, her royal blue gown, woven with Ghanaian gold threads, flaring like a flame in the chandelier's glow. Her sleek black hair, a defiant crown, caught every light, and her presence was a silent detonation, commanding the room without a word. The crowd of elites, tuxedos crisp, gowns shimmering, paused mid-sip, some smirking at the audacity of the woman they once overlooked, others shifting uneasily, sensing a shift in the air. Zola's eyes, twin embers of resolve, swept the hall, undaunted by the weight of their stares. Julian stood near the bar, his tailored suit a veneer of control, but his jaw tightened as whispers rippled. "Isn't that Zola Vance, the Innovate Forward woman?" Her nonprofit's name was on every philanthropist's lips, its mission to empower women of color in global leadership, a force reshaping power structures. Yet to Julian's Wall Street allies, she was still the dreamer who didn't belong. A former classmate, his tie loosened by bourbon, snorted, "Running a charity must pay peanuts, right?" Zola's lips curved, not in defense, but in quiet disdain, her silence louder than his jab. She moved forward, heels clicking like sparks on marble, each step a challenge to the world that had once tried to dim her. A board member, graying and flustered, intercepted her near a velvet-draped table. "Ms. Vance," he stammered, his bow tie askew, "your involvement with our leadership program is transformative." His deference, a nod to the $100 million donation Zola and Kaelen had engineered, hung in the air like smoke, unnoticed by most but heavy with meaning. Zola nodded, her gaze steady, knowing the board's gratitude was less about admiration and more about survival. They'd agreed to her terms, diversity-focused curricula, equity mandates, because her influence left them no choice. She wasn't here to thank them. She was here to claim what was hers. Across the hall, Julian's eyes narrowed, his knuckles whitening around a champagne flute. Blair, in a silver gown that gleamed like ambition, leaned closer, her voice a low hiss. She's acting like she runs this place. You can't let her steal your night. Julian's smirk was a mask, but inside Zola's poise was a blade twisting in his pride. He'd ruled Blackwood's social scene years ago, his mergers celebrated while her ideas were dismissed as noble but impractical. Now her name carried weight he couldn't ignore. Forbes covers, global summits, whispers of her impact. She's a fraud, he muttered, but his voice wavered, betraying the doubt gnawing at him. Blair's eyes glinted, calculating. Then prove it, Julian. Put her back in her place. Zola felt their stares, twin daggers from across the room, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced this before. Classmates who'd called her too passionate, professors who'd praised her mind but questioned her fit. She'd learned to navigate their world, smiling through their microaggressions. But tonight was different. She wasn't here to play their game. She was here to rewrite the rules. A young alum, her dress vibrant with African print, approached, eyes wide with admiration. Ms. Vance, your work inspired my nonprofit, she said, voice trembling. You showed us we don't have to shrink. Zola's smile softened, a spark of connection. Keep burning bright, she said, her words a quiet command. Julian watched, his composure fraying. The hall, once his kingdom, felt unsteady, its air thick with the heat of Zola's presence. He drained his flute, the champagne bitter. Blair's hand tightened on his arm, her smile a polished weapon. She's turning heads, she whispered, her tone a mix of envy and strategy. Do something, or she'll eclipse you. Julian nodded, his mind racing. He'd humiliate Zola, not with shouts, but with the sharp, public cruelty he'd perfected. She was a threat, not just to his ego, but to the world he'd built on charm and control. He stepped forward, ready to strike, his words already forming like embers, ready to ignite. Zola sensed the shift, the room's pulse quickening. She stood near a towering floral arrangement, its petals no match for the fire, in her stance. She wasn't here to answer Julian's taunts or Blair's schemes. She was here to claim a stage they couldn't fathom, one built on the lives she'd transformed. The board member lingered, offering pleasantries, but her focus was elsewhere, on the oak doors at the hall's end, where Kaelen would soon enter. Their plan, a blaze carefully stoked, was about to erupt. She wasn't just attending a reunion, she was setting the stage for a reckoning, one that would leave Julian's world in ashes. Still chasing your little black women's education fantasy, Zola? Innovate backward, is it? Julian Croft's voice sliced through the Blackwood Grand Hall's glittering din, a polished blade of mockery aimed at Zola Vance. He stood, champagne flute raised, his tailored suit gleaming under the chandelier's fire, surrounded by a knot of Wall Street allies whose smirks mirrored his own. The crowd hushed, their eyes sharp with anticipation, locked on Zola, her royal blue gown a defiant flame against the hall's opulence. Blair, her silver dress catching light like a predator's glint, leaned into Julian, her whisper venomous. Show her she's nothing here. Julian's smile was a weapon, honed by years of boardroom victories. But beneath it, a flicker of doubt betrayed him. Zola's presence, unyielding and radiant, was a spark he couldn't extinguish. Zola stood near the floral-draped stage, her sleek black hair a crown of defiance. Her gaze a molten arrow that pierced Julian's bravado. The room's pulse stuttered, split between those who laughed with Julian, old Blackwood elites, their privilege a shield, and those who shifted uneasy, sensing a storm. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, clutched her glass, whispering to a friend, "She's Zola Vance, the Innovate Forward leader." Zola's nonprofit, a global force empowering women of color in leadership, was no mere charity. It had shifted paradigms, channeling billions into education programs that reshaped power from Lagos to London. Yet Julian's crowd saw only a dreamer out of place. Julian stepped closer, his voice louder, dripping with condescension. "This hall isn't for your little charity stunts, Zola," he said, the words echoing like a gavel. "Stick to your fundraisers. Leave power to those who know it." The insult landed like a match in dry grass, igniting snickers from his allies. Blair's laugh, sharp and crystalline, cut through, her eyes glinting with triumph. She'd urged this moment, her whispers in Julian's ear a catalyst. Make her small again. To them, Zola's work, her mission to lift women like her, was a quaint hobby, irrelevant in their world of mergers and money. The crowd leaned in, some relishing the spectacle, others, younger, bolder, frowning, their faith in Zola's vision a quiet rebellion. Zola's smile didn't waver, but it sharpened, a blade of her own. She stood taller, her gown catching the light like a beacon, her silence a firestorm held in check. Every eye felt the weight of her presence, a woman who'd once dimmed herself for Julian's approval, now blazing with purpose. Years ago, his critiques had stung. Your ideas are too loud, Zola, he'd murmured, dismissing her passion for equity as naive. She'd folded then, softening her voice, her dreams to fit his world. Now she was done bending. You're wrong, Julian, she said, her voice low but lethal, cutting through the laughter like a spark through smoke. The room gasped, the air electric with her defiance. Julian's smirk faltered, his flute trembling in his hand. He'd expected her to shrink, to flee, as she had in their marriage's quiet battles. But Zola's eyes held no trace of that woman. They burned, unapologetic, as if she saw through his polished cruelty to the insecurity beneath. The Forbes cover, her name on global lips, her nonprofit's billions, they haunted him, a truth he couldn't outrun. He pressed on, voice rising. You think your little programs matter? This is Blackwood, real power, not your fantasies. His allies chuckled, but the sound was thinner now, their confidence fraying as Zola stood unmoved. A board member, hovering nearby, adjusted his tie, sweat beading on his brow. He knew the truth. Zola's influence had forced Blackwood's hand, her $100 million donation a sword held over their legacy, demanding diversity and equity. His nervous glance flickered to the oak doors at the hall's end, as if sensing the storm about to break. The young alum stepped closer to Zola, her voice soft but firm. Your work changed my life, Ms. Vance. Others nodded, a ripple of support that Julian didn't see. His focus locked on Zola, desperate to reclaim control. Blair's hand tightened on Julian's arm, her smile a mask of calculation. Finish it, she hissed, sensing the crowd shift. Julian's eyes narrowed, his pride a fragile ember he couldn't let die. He opened his mouth, another barb ready, but Zola's gaze held him, a fire that burned hotter than his scorn. She didn't need to speak again. Her presence was a verdict, a promise that his world was about to crumble. The hall's air thickened, every breath heavy with anticipation. Somewhere beyond the crowd, the oak doors quivered, a low groan signaling Kaelen Shaw's approach. Zola's lips twitched, a spark of knowing. Julian's blade had struck, but hers was sharper, and the inferno was coming. Your leadership program's reshaping the world, Zola. Kaelen Shaw's voice thundered as the oak doors of Blackwood's Grand Hall crashed open, his navy suit cutting through the chandelier's glow like a blade of midnight. Zola Vance stood unshaken, her royal blue gown a blazing ember in the room's stunned silence, her sleek black hair a defiant crown. A massive screen behind the stage flared to life, its bold white text searing the crowd. Innovate Forward, 1.5 and 1 women empowered, 3B education impact. The elites, tuxedos stiff, gowns shimmering, gaped, their champagne flutes frozen midair. Some, the younger alums, erupted in applause. Others, Julian Croft's Wall Street cronies, exchanged uneasy glances, their smirks from moments ago dissolving like ash. Julian stood rooted, his face paling, the flute in his hand trembling as Kaelen's presence, a billionaire titan whose wealth dwarfed their fortunes, shifted the room's gravity. Zola's eyes, twin flames of triumph, met Kaelen's, a silent vow passing between them. He strode toward her, his steps deliberate, each one a spark igniting the hall's tension. Your work's been endorsed by the United Nations, he said, loud enough for all to hear, his voice a low, resonant fire. You're not just leading, Zola, you're rewriting history. The words landed like a torch in dry grass, burning away Julian's venomous taunt. Innovate backward, that had echoed minutes before. Zola's smile, sharp and unyielding, was a blade of its own, slicing through the remnants of his scorn. She stepped forward, her voice clear, cutting, "My charity stunts just changed the game, Julian." The crowd gasped, a wave of shock rippling through silk and satin, her words a direct answer to his insult. Julian's jaw clenched, his eyes darting as if seeking an escape. Blair, her silver gown now a dull sheen, gripped his arm, her face a mask of forced composure. She'd urged him to crush Zola, whispering venom to stoke his pride. But now the room